Hello, and welcome to Entangled, the podcast where we explore the science of consciousness, the true nature of reality, and what it means to be a spiritual being having a human experience. I'm your host, Jordan Youkilis, and this two-part series on The Great Work continues episode 87 and my conversation with John Coffey. In The Great Work, I describe the multi-generational plans laid by the deep state to consolidate power and control in advance of the day they would reveal their methods on the Great Political Smash. We start with a discussion on the Fabian Socialists and the deep state's method of gradualism. We then describe secrecy, hierarchy, and the ruling society of the cabal, the Committee of 300. Next, we ask, does P head the Committee of 300? In part 2, we begin with the sordid history of central banks, crisis initiation, organized crime, and war in America. We continue with how the children of light throw the Olympians into the abyss, and then we conclude part 2 with a discussion on the great work and the path of initiation. Music from the show is available on the Spotify playlist Entangled, The Vibes. If you like the show, please drop a 5-star review and subscribe on Substack, X, Apple, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please enjoy the episode. The Great Work and the Great Political Smash. What is the Great Work? In my conversation with John Coffey, John proposed that the Great Work is the roadmap followed by the cabal. Their multi-generational plans to lock humanity into rule by one world government. The Great Work explains how this oligarchy of evil has used tools including central banking, crisis initiation, organized crime, and war to gain power, molding the world in preparation for the Great Political Smash, the day in which their power would prove absolute, when they could openly reveal the methods of the great work, and smugly mock the masses as to how they'd been deceived. The Fabian Society and deep state gradualism. Until quite recently, humanity was on the precipice of the great political smash. The Fabian Society is one of the institutions that has been instrumental in executing the great work. Glenn Beck is one of the few investigative journalists who has had the courage to expose the Fabian Society. Here is a long segment from his phenomenal investigative series on Ukraine. In this report, Beck documents the history of the Fabian Society and how its subversive members formed the organization we today call the Deep State.
Now, you may have heard me in the past, a couple thousand times, talk about a group called the Fabian Society. It was created when London looked like this in 1884, and it took its name from a Roman general named Fabius. His Latin nickname means delayer. Well, that doesn't sound very good. Delayer? I don't want to be... Well, he was fighting Hannibal. Remember the one with the elephants? This powerful army came across the mountains, and Fabius avoided major head-on battles. Instead, he used smaller strategic skirmishes, and his patience led to attrition, and it wore down Hannibal. This is the Fabian Society. This is one of their booklets from around the turn of the century after they first started. Socialism and intellectuals. All intellectuals love Fabian socialism. In their very first pamphlet, they declared, "For the right moment you must wait, as Fabius did most patiently when warring against Hannibal. Though many censured his delays, but when the time comes, you must strike hard as Fabius did, or your waiting will be in vain and fruitless." Has anybody thought the socialists are starting to hit hard? One of the Fabian Socialist Society's symbols is this. It's a tortoise, and you know the story of the tortoise and the hare. It represents their overall strategy in converting a government to socialism incrementally over time, rather than just trying to do it through a violent revolution. The motto that always went with the Fabian tortoise said, "When I strike hard." The Fabian Society, their coat of arms is this. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing, which represented the Fabian Society's method. I mean, got to hand it to them. At least they're being honest about their deception, I guess. We've talked about this several times. This is the Fabian Socialist window. It's a stained glass window. The Fabian window designed by an early Fabian member that everybody loves. Oh my gosh, George Bernard Shaw. He's a playwright. He's a genius. He's won all kinds of awards. We should celebrate him and do all of his plays. The guy was a monster. This is one of his first books, Intelligent Women's Guide to Socialism and Capitalism by George Bernard Shaw. He was a Fabian socialist. He is also the guy who came up with the idea of maybe we can make some kind of a chamber and fill it with gas. That's George Bernard Shaw. So in this window that he designed, he depicted the Fabian founders. He included himself in the starring role, building the new world. This is him hammering the world. See the guy with the bellows. They're heating the globe as if it's a piece of hot red steel. Then they hammer it into the shape they want. On the shield above the world, they have the wolf in sheep's clothing. The message across the top of the window says this: pray devoutly, hammer stoutly, and remold it nearer to the heart's desire. Well, that says it all, doesn't it? And pray devoutly, hammer stoutly. The Fabians were all about the concept of gradualism. And the crazy thing is, it's working. The Fabian Society founded Britain's Labour Party in 1900. Here's Britain's Labour Party that they started, and it's still going strong today. In 1951, the Fabians took their vision global, creating a couple of things. The Socialist International organization, still very active today. Their goal of Socialist International was to be a central coordinator for the worldwide socialist movement. It seeks to establish a world government and views the UN as the ideal way to accomplish this goal. When they had their Oslo conference, here they are originally, when they had their Oslo conference, though, in 1962, they said, the ultimate objective of the parties of Socialist International is nothing less than world government. As a first step towards it, then we seek to strengthen the United Nations so it may become more and more effective. Even today, Socialist International is committed to a new democratic order. In their Declaration of Principles, they state, the international challenge is nothing less than the beginning of a new democratic world society. We can't allow blocs, nations, and private corporations to shape the political structure of the planet as a mere byproduct of their own self-interest. Strengthening the United Nations is the important step in the creation of this new democratic world society. By the way, to give you some idea where the American socialists are headed, in 2017, the Democratic Socialists of America voted to withdraw from the International Socialist Union because they said these guys aren't left enough. Feels too many Socialist International member parties in other countries just aren't doing enough to bring that one world government into play. Now, these are the people today, of course, that we know. But there's lots of groups. Today's Fabian Society gets significant funding from the Foundation for European Progressive Studies. FEPS is the think tank wing of the Party of European Socialists. The PES is the association that all of the members of the socialist parties in the EU nations are part of. It's all part of an umbrella political party that campaigns to get socialists elected to the European Parliament. Naturally, all these European socialist parties are also members of the Socialists International. Another vital way Fabian socialists achieve gradualism, well, created university, especially really prestigious ones. In fact, this guy in 1894, George Bernard Shaw, and three other prominent Fabians decided to use the the 20,000 pound gift the society gave him, and they created the London School of Economics. Today, The Guardian describes the school as political clout, as being closely wired to Parliament, Whitehall, and the Bank of England, which is precisely what the Fabians set out to do. In 2006, it was a perfect moment illustrating the slow and steady success of the Fabian Socialist project, when the original Fabian window was reinstalled in the London School of Economics. Who had their picture taken in front of it? Who spoke at the unveiling ceremony? Labour Party and Fabian Socialist minister, Tony Blair. By the way, this is the graduating class of the London School of Economics in 1954. In that you'll find this young, handsome man. George Soros graduated in 54 with a philosophy and economics degree. I'm not exactly sure what kind of philosophy they teach there, but I could guess. All right, let's go back to America, because that's what we really care about, right? Well, as socialists developed their slow and steady approach in England, socialists were trying to gain a foothold in America as well. This guy is Walter Lippmann. He's a famous American journalist and was a member of the New York Socialist Party. In fact, here's the New York Socialist Party at the beginning. In France, near the end of World War I, he worked briefly on the staff of this guy, Edward House. Now, Edward House is really interesting because here he is with Woodrow Wilson and his really evil wife, who was actually president for a while, but that's a different story. Here he is over here with the president. Now, House was the president's closest advisor. Wilson and House's partnership was a little shady because House wasn't a member of Wilson's cabinet. He had no official position at all, and yet he lived at the White House. In 1917, House put Lippmann in charge of a secret panel. It was a presidential top-secret research group. Here they are. It's called the Inquiry, which made up pretty much almost the entirety of the Ivy League academics. And Lippmann recruited most of the advisors, and the Inquiry met in secret to design America's post-World War I plans for the world. While the Inquiry was hard at work, Wilson wrote this to House, quote, "When the war is over, we can force them," meaning the European allies, "to our way of thinking, because by that time they will, among other things, be financially in our hands." Holy cow, that sounds pretty evil. In December 1917, the Inquiry sent Wilson a report which detailed how the U.S. could use money as a weapon for a diplomatic offensive to manipulate Europe when the war was finally over. In January 1918, Wilson worked in a room alone with Colonel House, and together they worked directly from the Inquiry's report to type this out. This is Woodrow Wilson's famous 14 points. This could be considered the birth of the deep state. Wilson's 14 points, of course, helped create something else. This is an original letter from Woodrow Wilson talking about the League of Nations and how it is the only thing that will save the world, and Europe must follow along. The League of Nations, in particular, this, the 14th point, called for something like it. It was the world's first major attempt at a structure for world government. Well, Wilson took several members of the Inquiry with him to France for the Paris Peace Conference. Here they are in Paris, France, and here is the Paris Peace Conference. Now, Lippmann, as part of the delegation, when the conference was over, the Inquiry members returned to the U.S. and created this. Oh, here's where it gets conspiratorial. The Council on Foreign Relations. It would be an organization of American diplomats, and and other government officials. Here they are. Here are the government diplomats. Here's some other officials. Here's some bankers, some high-level journalists. A ton of academics were there. I mean, it was all of it. It was supposed to be nonpartisan, of course. The stated aim of the CFR would be to develop and influence government policy. So it was outside of the government. In other words, just to continue doing the work that was set out by the inquiry. The official history of the Council of Foreign Relations is even called Continuing the Inquiry. Conspiracies. All right, over time, the CFR would prove to be the perfect marriage between academia and the media to affect government policy. So now, let's fast forward 20 years. It's 1939. America's about to go to war again, mainly because of all of the things that Wilson did after World War I. But this time, FDR is president, and he's a Wilson admirer. The most socialist-leaning president in American history so far. And shortly after World War II broke out in 1939, the Rockefellers decided to fund a 5-year top-secret Council on Foreign Relations project called the War and Peace Studies. Now, at that time, the State Department was still relatively small, and with a war on the horizon for the U.S., the Council on Foreign Relations saw a golden opportunity. The CFR proposed that this top-secret research project would shape American foreign policy, just like the inquiry had done under Wilson. So over the next 5 years of the project, the War and Peace Studies Group produced 682 memos for the State Department. All of them were marked classified at the time. The State Department marked all of the documents classified. Neither party wanted it to be known that the State Department was collaborating with some outside group. All right, 2 years after the top-secret War and Peace Studies project began, the U.S. government formed another tight partnership with people from the outside. FDR wanted an organization that would campaign against isolationism that was dominant across the country at the time. And isolationism, was it isolationism as we think, or is it just like, can we stay out of everybody else's business? This was months before Pearl Harbor. So he needed help shaping public opinion in support of the war, you know, just in case. Well, his wife was helped. Eleanor Roosevelt, she was named honorary co-chair of the new organization called Freedom House. Whoa, who doesn't love that? It's like the Patriot Act, except in a house. It was funded by the U.S. government, yet somehow classified as a non-government organization. How's that possible? This is just the first instance of an NGO getting U.S. funds, your tax dollars, doing the will of the State Department without you knowing about it, and it wouldn't be the last time. The first 2 years of World War II were, let's just say, very busy for FDR and the State Department, since the League of Nations had obviously failed its primary mission, and it looks like our meddling led to another war. The State Department started working on a plan for a New World Organization in 1931. FDR even sketched out the UN structure while he was meeting in Tehran. That conference happened in 1943. And the Council on Foreign Relations, those members, well, they worked on a top-secret War and Peace Studies project, and they also attended the Dumbarton Oaks Conference in 1944, where the United Nations was designed. Oh, it was great. I think this is them in 1944 here. When the UN officially began a year later, one of the leaders in designing the UN Security Council was this guy. He's a Norwegian socialist. His name is Trygve Lie. I don't know. What do I look Scandinavian? He was also elected as the UN's first general secretary. Oh, wow. A socialist. Score another win for the Fabians, gradualism strategy. So obviously, the UN had stuck around, and it's been here long enough to become bloated, corrupt, and ineffective, just like all big governments throughout the world's history. Big surprise, it's been very bad at preventing wars. Progressives, regardless of nationality, they don't really understand this about human nature. You can't legislate wars from happening. It also turns out that people aren't really interested in a world that is run by one world government. One size does not fit all. Individual peoples like their independence. So, the European Union. What are we going to do? How did that happen? Well, the European Union was, let's take it down a notch. Before we fold everybody into the UN, because nobody wants to be ruled by somebody, on the other side of the sea. So the European Union slowly formed after the end of World War II. Again, just trying to be a buffer against the extremist nationalism that wrecked their countries and their continent through two major wars. This is when Paul-Henri Spaak, he is a Belgian who was the driving force behind the formation of the European Union. He was, believe it or not, oh my gosh, here he is, as a member of the Socialist Belgian Labour Party. Sensing another trend here? Socialists and progressives love the idea of centralized controlling bodies to run everything through their hand-picked experts. And they don't like it when people try to wiggle out from under their control. Oh no, no. Just look at the Brexit chaos in England. But back in 1947, deep state had been burrowing in for over 3 decades. It was developing its own culture and agenda. And that meant that the State Department wasn't necessarily in step with every president. For example, President Truman, he recognized the new state of Israel in 1948 against the State Department's wishes. In fact, they told him, "You're not going to do it. Harry, don't do it or we'll destroy you." Oh, that sounds familiar. The State Department preferred a United Nations trusteeship, which would create a Jewish and Arab province in Palestine, but no official states. Well, with the exception of Israel, here he is with the Israel celebration. With the exception of this, everything became about nation building in the State Department and using the UN as much as possible for international cover and using at the time communist containment as justification at home. Americans have always been isolationists, but not in the bad way. We don't want to be the world's policeman. We've had that tendency since we came here, unless we're deliberately attacked. But for the next 70 years, our government rarely reflected the will of its own people in foreign affairs. They just kept doing it. We tried to nation build in Korea under Eisenhower. Here's Cuba and Vietnam under Kennedy. Here's that one. How about these two? I love these two. How about Vietnam and the Dominican Republic? Johnson, that was another one we were going to solve. Or here's Nixon, Vietnam, Cambodia, and here he is, nation building in Laos. Then with the president, President Reagan, Grenada, and Nicaragua. Have any of these worked out for us? I just want to ask. Then Panama under Bush. And then there was Somalia, and then Haiti, and Bosnia, and Serbia under Clinton. There we go, here's Haiti. Ooh, here we are in Bosnia. I remember that worked out really well. Here he is in Serbia. And then we got to George W. Bush in Afghanistan. How's that working out? And then George W. Bush and Obama with Egypt. That didn't work out, did it? How come all these presidents are doing the same thing? It's not working out, ever. Ever. It's not working out. How come we're doing the same thing? Why doesn't this ever change? You don't have any new ideas? Oh, I'll show you in a minute. Oh, we have new ideas. You're going to love them. Let me take you to 1983. The U.S. government formed a new organization that would be like Freedom House, except on steroids. They called it NED. Who doesn't love NED? The National Endowment for Democracy. Again, funded by the U.S. government and even subject to congressional oversight. Yet it still insists on calling a NGO for some reason. Don't ask me how that works. But NED acts as a grant-making foundation, giving your dollars to private groups in other countries with the purpose of promoting democracy in those countries. NED's board of directors, they are great people. There's Carl Gershman as president. Now, who's Carl Gershman? Don't worry, he's just the former executive director of the Social Democrats USA. Yeah, the other main socialist part in the U.S. is Gershman. He's still the president of NED today. For the deep state to survive, longevity and tenure is key. So when they created NED, it was approved by Congress, and one of its founding purposes, was this: promoting non-governmental participation in democratic training programs and strengthening democratic electoral processes abroad in cooperation with indigenous democratic forces. Wow, that sounds like a fancy way of saying, I don't know, revolution and election interference. But it goes on. When Congress reauthorized NED a few years later, there was additional mandates. And it's this one, that NED consult with the State Department on any overseas programs it funds prior to the commencement of their activities. Wow. So if you're tracking with me, the National Endowment for Democracy, supposedly an NGO, even though it's fully funded by you, coordinates with the State Department before it starts any of its overseas activities. Perfect. Let me show you some. By 2008, our nation building was not working, especially when it came to Afghanistan and Iraq. That's when we got our first community organizer in chief, President Barack Obama. Oh my gosh. Now Barry, later known as Barack, he rose through the political ranks in the same wolf in sheep's clothing mold of the Fabians. Distract and dazzle with hope while delivering tons of change. Oh, he was all over. Overseas, we obviously needed a change of strategy because it wasn't working. Here, the panel's report assails the CIA for failure on Iraq weapons, the 7 deadly sins of failure in Iraq, and of course, we all know that picture. The CIA and military ops weren't cutting it anymore. We'd have to tailor our nation building, country by country. How are we going to do that? Well, welcome to the age of irresponsibility. Because the deep state didn't stop its efforts altogether. No. They just farmed them out. They found a better way. That way they don't have to be responsible. The military would pull back, and we'd use a private military company like Blackwater. State Department pulls out, and we'll use those NGOs. CIA pulls back, and, well, we have Google, and Twitter, and Facebook. They're doing all the community organizing on a global scale, and we can't control them. Or can we? You see, the tools have changed, but you still heat the world and remold it nearer to the heart's desire.
The Fabian Society's method of gradualism has also been called the totalitarian tiptoe by journalist David Icke. Other famous Fabian socialists include Aldous Huxley, author of Brave New World, and George Orwell, author of 1984. Ever wonder how Huxley and Orwell were so prescient in their dystopian futures? Because they were writing the script. These books weren't warnings for the public. They were instruction manuals for their co-conspirators, and predictive programming to trick the public into accepting that dark future as inevitable. Hierarchy, Secrecy, and the Committee of 300. The Huxley family, like the Rockefellers and Gates families, is obsessed with eugenics. Eugenics has been rebranded in the modern era as genetic engineering. The ultimate goal of both is depopulation. John Coleman, author of Conspirators' Hierarchy and the Committee of 300, named Aldous Huxley as a member of the Illuminati's ruling hierarchy in his 1991 book. Coleman's foreword reads, quote, "In my career as a professional intelligence officer, I had many occasions to access highly classified documents, but during service as a political science officer in the field in Angola, West Africa, I had the opportunity to view a series of top classified secret documents which were unusually explicit. What I saw filled me with anger and resentment and launched me on a course from which I have not deviated, namely to uncover what power it is that controls and manages the British and United States governments. I was thoroughly familiar with all of the well-known secret societies such as the Royal Institute for International Affairs, the RIA, the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR, the Bilderbergers, Trilaterals, the Zionists, Freemasonry, Bolshevism, Rosicrucianism, and all of the spin-offs of these secret societies. As an intelligence officer, and even before that as a young student in the course of my studies at the British Museum in London, I had cut my teeth on all of them, plus a good number of others with whom I imagined Americans were familiar. But when I came to the United States in 1969, I found that names like the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, the Club of Rome, the German Marshall Fund, the Sinai Foundation, the Round Table, the Fabianists, the Venetian Black Nobility, the Mont Pelerin Society, Hellfire Clubs, and many others were at best totally unknown here, or else their true functions were at best but poorly understood, if at all." End quote. In Coleman's book, other individuals he named as past and present members of the Committee of 300 included Arthur Balfour, George H.W. Bush, Winston Churchill, the Delano family designate, the DuPont family designate, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh of the British royal family, Her Majesty Queen Juliana and Her Royal Highness Princess Beatrix of the Dutch royal family, Colonel Edward M. House, the John J. family designate, Henry Kissinger, Walter Lippmann, J.P. Morgan, David Rockefeller, Ilya de Rothschild, Edmund James de Rothschild, Baron Rothschild, and S.G. Warburg. There have now been 5 Baron Rothschilds who are also members of the House of Lords. The 5th and current Baron Rothschild is Nathaniel Nat Philip Victor James Rothschild. On Substack, I've included a picture of QDrop3431, in which Q replied to a fun picture featuring Baron Nat Rothschild and Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine is known for her role as Jeffrey Epstein's partner in crime in their global human trafficking, pedophilia, and child sacrifice network. Both Maxwell and Epstein, like Maxwell's father, media mogul Robert Maxwell, are widely suspected to be assets of Israeli and/or American intelligence, possibly amongst others. In John Coleman's book, he is likely referring to the first Baron Rothschild, Nathaniel Meyer Rothschild. Funny enough, Nathaniel Meyer Rothschild was a leading advocate for the creation of the Federal Reserve. 2 years after the first Baron's death, the UK's Foreign Minister, Arthur Balfour, wrote an infamous document to the second Baron Rothschild, Lionel Walter Rothschild. The Balfour Declaration reads, quote, "Foreign Office, November 2nd, 1917. Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you on behalf of His Majesty's government the following declaration of sympathy with the Jewish Zionist aspirations which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. Yours, Arthur James Balfour." So, here Arthur Balfour is acting as Foreign Minister of the United Kingdom, the constitutional monarchy of the United Kingdom. Balfour promises the Rothschilds, a private family, the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine. As a reminder, this was in 1917, 2.5 decades before the Holocaust of World War II, an event historians tend to conflate with the establishment of the Zionist State of Israel in 1948. To quote President John F. Kennedy, Palestine was hardly Britain's to give away, especially to a private family of Satanists who are not Jewish. Lionel Walter Rothschild's great-nephew Jacob Rothschild, the fourth Baron Rothschild, was interviewed in March of 2017. The interview with former British ambassador to Israel, Daniel Taub, commemorated the 100th anniversary of the Balfour Declaration. Listen to him describe how his family orchestrated the events that led to the Zionist State of Israel. You may see why many suspect Jacob Rothschild inspired the character of Mr. Burns in The Simpsons.
Excellent.
It's 67 words long, it's 100 years old, and it changed the course of history for the Middle East and the Jewish people. The Balfour Declaration, the expression of the British government's support for a Jewish home in Palestine, was sent by British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to the second Lord Rothschild. I'm here in Buckinghamshire at Waddesdon Manor to speak with the fourth Lord Rothschild about the Balfour Declaration, what it means for Britain, for the Jewish people and the Rothschild family. So it's possibly the most famous letter in modern Jewish history, and it begins with 3 words: Dear Lord Rothschild. Why was it that this letter was sent by the Foreign Secretary to your great-uncle Walter?
It's an interesting question because he was really interested in ornithology, although he became interested in Zionism. I think the reason was this, that it was primarily a movement from Eastern Europe, but they didn't clarify who was in charge of that movement. And in addition, it was, after all, in Great Britain. So they felt that the Rothschild family should be the one to whom it was addressed. And Walter was Lord Rothschild, and he was a Zionist. And those really are the background reasons.
And here it is, the Balfour Declaration. What do you feel when you see it here?
I genuinely feel it's one of the most extraordinary moments in the history of the Jewish people. If you think it took 3,000 years to get to this, and then you say, how did this miracle happen? It's the most incredible piece of opportunism. I mean, if you think you had an impoverished would-be scientist, Chaim Weizmann, who somehow gets to England, meets a few people, including members of my family, seduces them. He has such great charm and conviction. He gets to Balfour, and he unbelievably persuades Balfour and Lloyd George, the Prime Minister, and most of the ministers, that this idea of the national home for Jews should be allowed to take place. I mean, it's so unlikely.
Yes, Mr. Burns, that story about the foundations of the Zionist State of Israel is just so unlikely. Almost like you were lying, you terrorist vampire freak. Back to John Coleman's book. On Substack, I've included an appendix in which he diagrams the organizational structure of the Committee of 300. At the top, he lists the King of Saudi Arabia, the head of the House of Saud crime family, with well-documented ties to the Bush crime family. In past episodes, I've documented the story of CIA Project MKUltra survivor Kathy O'Brien. O'Brien spent decades as a mind-controlled sex slave and was intimately involved with the highest levels of the Reagan-Bush administration. In her book, Transformation of America, O'Brien documents a mission on which George H.W. Bush and Dick Cheney prostituted her to King Fahd bin Abdulaziz Al Saud. Fahd was king and prime minister of Saudi Arabia from 1982 until 2005. King Fahd's rape of O'Brien at Le Enfante Hotel in Washington, D.C. also included 5 young girls, who O'Brien described by saying, quote, physical likeness characteristics strongly suggested that these Saudi Arabian girls were his own children. Their ages ranged from approximately 10 to 20 years old, end quote. King Fahd was succeeded by his half-brother, Abdullah bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, who was king of Saudi Arabia from 2005 until his death in 2015. At that point, another half-brother, Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, became king. King Salman continues to rule Saudi Arabia, although de facto leadership has passed on to his seventh son, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS, due to King Salman's poor health. Now you should know that MBS's cousin, Prince Mansour bin Mukrin Al Saud, was once in the running for the Saudi kingship. His father had served as crown prince for a few months in 2015 before King Salman removed him. King Salman shortly thereafter elevated his son MBS to that position instead, making MBS the heir apparent. Is it possible that Prince Mukrin never gave up his designs on the Saudi kingship? Could he have found a powerful ally in his half-brother, Prince Al-Walid bin Talal? Prince Al-Walid is another member of the Saudi royal family and one of the richest people in the world. He was the single biggest foreign investor in the US dating back to the mid-1990s, and his portfolio included holdings in Citigroup, Carlyle Group, Fox, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, Apple, Motorola, Time Warner, Walt Disney, Teledesic, Twitter, and Netscape. He also funded the Harvard University Muslim alumni, owned more of Fox than anyone else besides the Murdochs, was the largest shareholder in Twitter, and partnered with Bill Gates to provide vaccines to the Third World. Bin Talal is also close to the Podesta brothers, and it has even been alleged that he sponsored Barack Hussein Obama Jr.'s entry into Harvard Law School. Did you know that the top 5 floors of the Mandalay Bay Hotel in Las Vegas are actually the Four Seasons? Did you know that the majority owners of the Four Seasons are Prince Al-Walid and Bill Gates? Do you remember at which hotel took place the largest mass shooting in American history on October 1st, 2017? You know, the one the media never mentioned again. Was Crown Prince MBS staying at the Four Seasons on the night of the Las Vegas massacre? Could he have been the true target of the shooting? Could another head of state tipped him off about an impending assassination plot? Did you know that after one month after the Vegas shooting, Crown Prince MBS led the largest corruption purge in the history of Saudi Arabia? This counterinsurgency resulted in more than a dozen senior princes and nearly 40 ministers arrested on charges of corruption and money laundering. Prince Al-Walid bin Talal was amongst those detained. 2 days after the arrests began, Prince Mukrin died under suspicious circumstances when his helicopter crashed. What an interesting chain of events. I wonder if they could have had any lasting geopolitical significance. It's important we learn names like Prince Mukrin, Prince Al-Walid, Queen Elizabeth II, King Charles III, Evelyn, Jacob, Nat, and Lynn Forrester de Rothschild, and George Soros. Because to prevent the cabal's completion of the great work, it's important that we unwind the leadership structure and that we hold them accountable for their crimes against humanity. In my review of this hierarchy of evil, 2 pertinent questions arose regarding the head of this snake. The first will be logical to those familiar with the deep state. The second, at first glance, perhaps not so much. First, who does George Soros take orders from? Second, was Daniel Paysar actually King Louis XVII? Does P head the Committee of 300? Why this strange pair of questions? What does the first question have to do with the second? When it comes to researching the deep state, there are few better than Mel Krell and Sam Tripoli. Here they are in 2020 discussing the Paysar family on Tripoli's podcast, Tinfoil Hat. In this segment, they reference a November 4th, 2016 interview between Breitbart and Blackwater founder Eric Prince, a section of which I've spliced into the conversation. If this is your first time hearing Prince's interview, I can promise you that it won't be your last.
So I've been wanting to do a Paysar episode for a while, ever since Q dropped the P, and that sent me down this rabbit hole. And what's very interesting is how hard it is to find information on this family. And I'll tell you, it's almost like the black nobility. Good luck finding
Exactly
any
like it.
information on either. I mean, like, dude, it's so hard to find. And it took forever to get anybody to come on and talk black nobility. And it's taken forever to get anybody to talk. Is it Paysar
Why do you
or
think that is? You
Passar?
think that's fear? You think it's fear?
I think it's just what we're seeing with
It is hard to find. I did so much digging, like all the way back to like books from the 1700s. I
right.
just got
It's
obsessed with it.
impossible because
I couldn't believe what I was reading.
it's 1984. It is the Department of Propaganda. They go back and they just wipe out things. Like find me any article that actually talks about when the NYPD chief talked about what he saw on Anthony Weiner's laptop. You can't find it. You can't find it anywhere. It has been wiped off. And I know I read it when it was coming out. I read it. And
It
if
was
you
like
don't
the Eric
think it's
Prince.
real,
Eric Prince came out. You remember Eric Prince came out? And
Yeah.
he's the one. It was like the only other voice being like,
I want to give color on why the FBI, why Comey had to do that last week.
Yeah, please do.
Because of Wienergate and the sexting scandal, the NYPD started investigating it through a subpoena, through a warrant. They searched his laptop and sure enough found those 650,000 emails. They found way more stuff than just the more information pertaining to the inappropriate sexting the guy was doing. They found State Department emails. They found a lot of other really damning criminal information, including money laundering, including the fact that Hillary went to this sex island with convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Bill Clinton went there more than 20 times. Hillary Clinton went there at least 6 times. The amount of garbage that they found in these emails of criminal activity by Hillary, by her immediate circle, and even by other Democratic members of Congress was so disgusting. They gave it to the FBI and they said, we're going to go public with this if you don't reopen the investigation and you don't do the right thing with timely indictments. I believe, I know, and this is from a very well-placed source of mine at 1PP, One Police Plaza in New York. The NYPD wanted to do a press conference announcing the warrants and the additional arrests they were making in this investigation, and they've gotten huge pushback to the point of coercion from the Justice Department, with the Justice Department threatening to charge someone that had been unrelated in the accidental heart attack death of Eric Garner, the guy almost 2 years ago. So that's the level of pushback the Obama Justice Department is doing against actually seeking justice in these email and other related criminal matters. There's 5 different parts of the FBI conducting investigation into these things with constant downdraft from the Obama Justice Department. So in the, I hope, unlikely and very unfortunate event that Hillary Clinton is elected president, we will have a constitutional crisis that we have not seen, I believe, since 1860.
Wow. So, Eric, so much to break down in that, but you're saying that the NYPD, if I'm not mistaken, is readying more warrants. They believe there'll be indictments coming down the pike very soon. Let's recap. What are the key details that you're breaking here on Breitbart News Daily?
NYPD was the first one to look at that laptop. Weiner and Huma Abedin, his wife, the closest advisor of Hillary Clinton for 20 years, have both flipped. Okay, they are cooperating with the government. They both have, they see potential jail time of many years for their crimes. For Huma Abedin sending and receiving and even storing hundreds of thousands of messages from the State Department server and from Hillary Clinton's own homebrew server, which contain classified information. Weiner faces all kinds of exposure for the inappropriate sexting that was going on and for other information they found. So NYPD first gets that computer, they see how disgusting it is, they keep a copy of everything, and they pass a copy onto the FBI, which finally pushes the FBI off, off their chairs, making Comey reopen that investigation, which was indicated in a letter last week. The point being, NYPD has all the information, and they will pursue justice within their rights if the FBI doesn't. And there is all kinds of criminal culpability through all the emails they've seen of that 650,000, including money laundering, underage sex, pay for play, and of course, plenty of proof of inappropriate handling, sending, receiving of classified information up to SAP level special access programs. So the plot thickens. NYPD was pushing because, as an article just quoted one of the chiefs, okay, that's the level just below commissioner. He said, as a parent, as a father with daughters, he could not let that level of evil continue. These are the unusual sliding door moments of history that people can stand up and be counted and make a real difference and to save the republic, save the Constitution that we actually need and love and that our forefathers fought and died for.
And now Sidney Powell is always thought, where is that laptop anyway? This is totally crazy.
Well,
Anyone that got that laptop,
here's the whole thing, how you know that story's real. And we'll get back.
No.
Is it Pesar or Pesar?
I call it Pesar, but
Okay.
it doesn't really matter.
This is how you know it's real, is because why would Comey open up the investigation that close to Hillary doing a victory lap?
Because he had no choice.
Because he had no choice. Because the New York PD made him do it. Now,
Right. And now
how many of those guys that are involved with that are dead? Like 8?
9 of 12. But are they dead? I don't know. I read the Q death pages. A little suspicious that some of those people are not dead. I hope not. I hope Cappy's not dead, but I hope a lot of the other ones are. And I can't imagine that all those cops killed. I mean, they didn't kill. I hope some of them are in witness protection. It doesn't make any sense. How's it possible?
I hope you are true, but it does. I mean, like the one police chief had a month till retirement and he offs himself. Come on.
How about the Shermans? It was a murder-suicide. Now we find out it was a straight-up murder. And
Well,
they
yeah,
create-
but
they
that's
own
interesting
hydrochloric
because
chloroquine.
we talked about this before. They were involved in Haiti, and everybody involved in Haiti, a lot of them are dead. A lot of them are
Well, yeah,
dead.
and a lot of the whistleblowers are dead. Remember that guy came to talk to Trump a few weeks later, dead.
So
this
let's get
gets
into the
it.
Pesars. Who are they?
Okay, so through all my research, and I like David Icke and all these people, Mark Dice. I went through their stuff. I went through a lot of records, and basically, this is my opinion. Anyone can dig for themselves. I don't want to get attacked, but this is my opinion from everything I've read, which is a lot. And like you said, it's very hard to find. Anyway, Daniel Pesor is really the son of Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI. Here's what happened. So the rumor, I think it's true, is that the child was 2 years old. He was the heir apparent. See, LC would be King Louis, right? And anyway, the story as it goes is that King George, who was in bed with the financial side of the Illuminati, he took the 2-year-old child from prison and exchanged it with a different child who was deaf and mute. Okay. And that child was in England and then sent to given stock in Virginia Company.
They switch him out. They get him to England where he's under royal protection.
King George. Yeah.
King George. When he turns 19, they
Yeah.
decide to send him to America.
Right.
And he basically went there with what? The equivalent of like
went
$50
there
million?
Well, King George gave him a ship, 800 acres of land, and he went with a guy whose last name was Pesor. They changed his name to Bayshore, and they sent him over as Daniel Pesor. So they come over, to Virginia, and they start buying up land and building the railroads with that money.
That's how it starts, man. They decide they got to start building a railroads, and like the railroads,
Because
like
then they own the land. And these people cornered the market in transportation of goods and services. Remember, originally it was, so this is the Virginia Company. Originally, railroads were wood, but then guess who starts the first big steel company? The Paysor, Daniel Paysor. Now, what happens then? What else does he start? He starts the first fertilizer company. He owns all the big Lancaster cotton.
Oh yeah, there's a list of like everything that the Paysor family owns.
Right. Now their name is Paysor, but a lot of people there knew. And this anyway, so the old elder Paysor dies, okay? But he has 3 daughters, and they split it up. Now, Daniel Paysor leaves everything. One son of his died, Adam, and the other one, apparently, Louis Cass Paysor is the one that really built the entire railroad system, the entire cotton, fertilizer. They bought lots of forests, and they also made it that they owned 15 miles north and south or east and west of the railroad tracks that they had. So then you go into the next phase of their. First of all, you have to remember this is the French monarchy. These aren't Americans. These aren't Americans.
People don't realize that, dude. It's the French monarchy. Royal family.
Right. Exactly. That's how they had unlimited money and resources and knowledge and ability.
And you combine that with the British royal family.
Right. Well, that's going to come to the, a lot of people don't know that DC is a corporation, just like the Vatican is a corporation, just like the City of London is a corporation.
Which is
they
my
have
whole
nothing
theory
to do with
that we're just Jesuit. These are all, and I include Israel into this.
I do
Jesuit,
too, but Israel's a weird, I'll get there, because my big thing with you was I was saying, the misconception is about the Rothschilds is people bought into a total con when it comes to anti-Semitism and those people. So
we'll get into that because I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
We'll get into that.
So,
but it is my belief that I was told by somebody, and if you tell me something, I'm going to assume it's real. Is that the Vatican owns like 60% of Israel? Somebody was telling me.
Well,
like a huge chunk.
Who owns the Vatican?
That's
the Rothschilds own the Vatican. They bought the Vatican.
Hold on. I believe the Vatican.
1832, the Rothschilds bought the Vatican.
Well, so that's a contention that Adam Green was talking about who controls the Vatican. But it is my belief that it is even beyond that black nobility above that. And that, the Rothschilds are just an extension of another of what we're seeing right here is that these guys rebrand themselves. So it's like Rothschilds are only I forget the name of the one of the 13 bloodlines, which goes back to what I'm saying is that and we'll get into that part. I know you want to talk about, but it's much greater than who runs. I just think the Vatican is Rome, and Rome was Egypt, and Egypt was the city of Atlantis.
Well, the Merchant of Venice, don't forget, that's where all banking started. This loan and debt meant like hell we live in. That's all based on debt and interest is a farce. It's a farce. Anyway, back to so Rothschild really means, first of all, it's a made up name. It means red shield. Okay.
Oh yeah, which is interesting because if you take a look at the Red Cross, right?
Wow,
they own that too.
Yeah.
So okay, so the Paysors give the daughters, the father, Louis Cass Paysor, his attorney and everything was this guy Leroy Springs, who was also one of the 13 or 12 families, 13 being the Paysors. And he's a Rothschild. Springs is the name. It was Springsteen. They came over. They were given land in New Jersey and New York. Well, this guy takes over the entire Louis Cass Paysor Trust. At this point, they're playing around with hiding companies like they do now. Like if you look at Nexium or Epstein, they have their parent company or trust, and then like 200 companies underneath that run by different trustees that we think are the CEOs, and they're not. They're just trustees. The owner to this day of all of these corporations is still the original owners, which are descendants of the French monarchy.
I'm going to add a link to this page I found. It's called reignsofheaven.org. And they just list all of the
I know,
holdings.
I saw it.
It is
Crazy.
like every rail company they basically own,
No
every
idea.
one of them.
Exxon, Standard Oil, GM. I mean, it's nuts, but people don't know. And this is really where
The
the real
Bank of
drama
Health
comes.
Springs, the Bank of Charleston. I mean, all these banks they own.
Oh.
First National Bank. It's just like Bank
Everything.
of
And
Richmond.
they have a monopoly on our energy. They own the entire energy grid, PG&E. Remember the fires in California? Who owns PG&E? The same parent company. So this is from my research. But the point is that, so the Pesor Trust is an irrevocable trust, and it was done under some maritime law, not our law of America. So our government cannot audit it. So because of this crazy trust that they did, and it was a forever trust, but then a lot of the leases for the railroads were 99-year trusts, which then expired in 1993, conveniently while George Bush Sr. was in office. And George Bush Sr. changed the entire Lewis Cass Pesor Trust into a new company called SEED, C-E-D-E and Company. C-E-D-E and Company owns America. Okay, and I'm sure you know that the
How do you
Fed,
spell that? C-E.
C-E-D-E and Company. Okay, so it's all the same people. Okay, this is the craziest part is you go through it and it's all the same people. And
Okay, so real quick before you can move on, here's some miscellaneous companies that they own. Okay, Standard Oil, Exxon, right?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah, they own our entire grid, which is, I think, why Trump put in the executive order about the grid last week. It's getting hot, you know. And but here's the thing about them. Guess who else they own? They own the Federal Reserve. Okay.
That is crazy. They own the Federal Reserve.
Yes. And they are the only true, because anyone that trades an IPO or whatever, they know they have to sign a contract. Well, it's a really long contract that has lots of conflicting stuff on it. But at the end of the day, everything, including mortgages, goes right back to them. So this is still this trust that nobody can investigate. Okay. Now President Jackson tried, and it's the same people just now. And they intermarry. They don't leave.
They own General Motors.
Everything. It's crazy.
Cadillac.
Yeah. But aren't we all told that certain people, CEOs, chairmen, they're not
General Electric.
They don't have any power, the people that run these companies. It's all run by this trust. And then they spread out these companies. So anyway, George Bush Sr., after the 99-year leases ended for the railroads and the banks and everything, started this SEED and Company, which is the only company that really owns anything on the New York Stock Exchange. Okay. And they have the DTC and DTCC, and these are deposit companies that are the only people that can deposit or withdraw from the stock exchange.
According to this, the Charleston, Cincinnati, Chicago Railroad Company is the Federal Reserve.
Right, owned by the
Pesor family.
Pesor Trust.
Yeah. Holy shit, dude.
Yeah. So here's the real screwing us. And it's not just us. These are banks. They have banks all over the world that they control, 184 banks. But here's the truth is that they own it's like type A stock, it's called, on the stock exchange. And that's the owners, and those are the voters. Only, they say, like 5% of ownership in these companies is traded on the stock exchange.
Oh, yeah. Look at this. LCPR owns 9/10 of all preferred share issue of each of these 45,000, and the rest of the world owns 5,000 shares of issued stock.
That's it. And remember, they also own the Federal Reserve Bank. Okay. So where do we pay our taxes? To the Federal Reserve Bank, not to the America. So we put, we donate, we pay our taxes. We think it's going to help the homeless in America. It's going to, feed this person. It's going to clean up this, that. None of our money is going anywhere but to the private bank of the Federal Reserve. Now, the thing that happens is because they control our debt, no matter how much money we pay in taxes, there's like trillions of dollars in the Federal Reserve. We're never, ever, ever going to pay off that debt, and they know that. So everything that we put into every tax that they take and give to the Federal Reserve is going towards interest on our national debt. None of it is going back to the people. None of it, okay?
It's
So then the other thing is, if you connect all this, they've also gotten to a point where the last 3 presidents played along, they were involved, and they started setting up foundations, as you know, the Rockefellers, the Rockefeller Foundation.
Real quick, before we get into that, I want to say something. So there is a notion that the Rockefellers and even the Rothschilds are just basically desk jockeys for the Passar family.
Exactly.
And that they basically propped, in particular the Rockefellers,
Right.
prop them up,
Right.
so that they
And
become
why?
the face of something that they. Now you got to understand something about these Passars. The truth, the belief is that they have children and they don't even register them.
Right.
There's no registry of them. There's no
Right.
actual evidence of a public record of these people existing.
Right.
Why-
This
why
is
would you
where
do
it gets
that?
complex because, now we get into the satanic Illuminati side of this.
Why would you do that,
Is
XG?
it so that you can't trace them? Because
So you
Yeah.
can't trace them. You don't know who they are because they don't want anyone to know. I mean,
Right.
I'm 47 years old. I just found out about the Passar family in
On Q.
2019.
Right. Because remember CIA dropped that the bloodlines of the Illuminati until the CIA dropped it on their site about a year ago. I always thought like, yeah, whatever, and then that was for us to do some digging. They can't tell us everything, so that's when I started. But basically the thought in the 13 Council, which is the 13 families, 12 families with the Pacers at the top, they believe that the Pacer bloodline is the bloodline of from the Garden of Eden of Eve and the serpent. Okay.
So Eve, it's always been my thought that, Eve was hitting it on the side.
Well, that's their thought too. Of course, it sounds disgusting, but anyway,
Is that how we get lizard people? Half human, half.
I can't even go there without. That's like one level too far. But yeah. So basically, Neon Revolt had a good article on this. It doesn't matter if we believe it. We obviously think it's ludicrous, but they do, and that's the problem. So anyway, the Pacers at the top of the Illuminati chain, according to all this stuff, because they're believed to be the true descendants of Satan and Eve. So they are supposed to be the people that create the Antichrist.
These hoes ain't loyal.
No. So anyway, but also then you think about it. Adam and Eve had 2 kids. Cain killed Abel. The Rothschilds and the Rockefellers are Canaanites. There were tribes. It goes all the way to there. There were tribes in Israel. The Canaanites hate God. They feel like God sent the serpent / Lucifer, Satan, Moloch, whatever you want to call him, out of the Garden of Eden because of what happened. Well, they hate God. And their whole religion is based on destroying God and God's people. And it ties in today, crazy enough. But so the Pacers are the special people because they are supposed to be the one bloodline that will produce the Antichrist that will then bring the apocalypse. And then they can live their Georgia Guidestone life. They then the Georgia Guidestones become important. So basically, it doesn't matter if we don't believe it. There's so much evidence, and if it's on the CIA side and it's here, there, and everywhere, and it only came out now, it has something to do with Trump because they needed to get somebody in there like Trump that was an outsider that didn't care because all these other people are related. The Bushes are related. They have bloodlines of that they say, Lincoln and Clinton and all these, they can trace them back to different families. They all intermarry because, not just because of money, but because they believe that their bloodlines are superior to ours. So
I couldn't agree more. And here's the whole thing, dude. Kennedys are bloodlines.
right.
They say that
Jr.
Lincoln
went
is a
rogue.
Rothschild.
Yeah, but I think JFK Jr. went rogue, and that's why they killed him. He was, because so is Onassis, and then not JFK Jr., JFK Sr. and his brother didn't want to go. They wanted to give the power back to the people, and they were murdered, and then the truth is, some of these people, like Abraham Lincoln, is a Rothschild, but his father. But the truth is, he didn't believe in it. You have a choice. You always have free will because God gave you free will. But if you grow up believing that God is the problem and Satan is the answer, then that's what you believe. And, they say, money's the root of all evil. No, love of money is the root of all evil.
So a big thing about the Pissar family is that they have so many companies, and the belief is that the CFR is simply their trust, where all the people from all these that run all these companies get together and decide what's going to happen with the world because they own so much of the world.
Right. I say that there's a correlation between the resignation list in Q and the CFR. Now this is more recent work of mine, but every company in the CFR is connected to a PACER-owned company, okay, which we now call seed and company. But okay, so here's the other thing about
that's such a big revelation because for the longest time
we couldn't find it. I know.
But no, we thought that these resignations had to do with like pedophilia or dark art stuff, and it does in a way, but I'm really starting to think this had more to do
of the American people.
With this had more to do with they knew this virus pandemic was coming. Absolutely. And half of them probably hate their job, so they quit earlier. But I think they saw that the writing on the wall.
Well, also they're complicit in it because we've been told that if we're not globalists and we're not helping foreign countries that are starving, even though many people in our own country are homeless and starving. I'm in NYC. Where the hell's the money going? It's not going to the people. That's for damn sure. But now if we want to go to the CFR, all of those companies can be connected back to companies in that trust. And then there's also the media, but they own them too. So the next thing is that the globalist thing is really about, they tell you it's all for good. And if you want to vomit if you read the mission statement of any of these groups, the CFR, but, World Health Organization, Trilateral Commission, they're all about that these elites, these people that are involved in this corporation, charity that brings them billions and billions and billions of dollars, God knows where it goes, they are looking out for the good of humanity. It's the exact opposite. It's
I'm starting to learn that, man. The more the media tells you somebody's a good guy, the more I realize they're a scum bag.
And when I hear global or world or international in front of a foundation, I am pretty sure that it's connected to the same thing, which is about depopulation, in my opinion, because if you look at the Georgia Guidestones and the original stuff, those Georgia Guidestones are, I believe, what those people believe, deep down. And look, I'm not saying that they're all, whatever. Their end goal has nothing to do with us, okay? It has nothing to do with you or me or him or my parents, your kids. They don't care about us. We don't matter. And this whole global thing, that the Fed can't be audited? We don't know. They apparently, what number did I write down? They have like 1.8 quadrillion dollars. We can't investigate the Fed because it's a private bank under a trust. These are crazy laws, and people have tried, but they almost killed Jackson. That's why Trump has the picture of Jackson on his wall of all presidents. Because Jackson said that he had ended the Rothschild Bank. He said it was the most evil force in the world. And then, like you said, Woodrow Wilson was brought in by the CFR. and the original CIA, which was called something else, which also the Pacers,
OSS.
the Pacers owned it. The Pacers owned it through their security system that ran the military railroad is the original CIA. Okay. So then, so now we're here, and right now the dilemma is, okay, so America's money has not been going back to us. That mortgage scandal, they don't care about us. They just took all our property back because we stupidly signed contracts thinking that it was our government that was giving us these mortgages, but it's not. It's the corporation of the United States of America that is basically part of these same people. So the Federal Reserve is all about enriching themselves, while we think that our tax money is not going to anything we think it's going to. It's going to debt. It's going to paying interest on our debt that we can never, ever satisfy. And that's what I think it's been on the Q map about them being at the top. They're not known of. The reason that they all protect them is because their bloodline is supposed to produce the Antichrist, which then will be the apocalypse, which then will take the world population down to 500 million, because it's easier to control 500 million than 7 billion. Okay, and I think we're there right now at the cusp, because a lot of people don't realize these executive orders that Trump has been doing are really about undermining the Fed. He's trying to, in my opinion, he's trying to bankrupt the Fed because he took the pandemic and turned it around on them. They knew it was coming because it's basically in that Agenda 2030. Oh, the worst is the UN. And most people don't, which is connected to the CFR, but most people don't know that in 1999, I believe it's McCarthy, put up a bill to pull us out of the UN and seize all their assets in America. And I think that would be a good start because, the elite, like they call themselves the elite, but if you look more into like their goals and agendas, first of all, they're all the same. They're all aligned on the same page. And, what's really scary is a lot of the media is in the CFR. And so are a lot of college presidents. And so are a lot of, if you look at their list of membership, it's unreal how much influence they have and power, and they have the money. And like Rockefeller said, I think there was some quote where he said that if people think that I'm trying to do this to make a global one world order, which is the goal is to have a one central bank, central political body, control the entire world and turn it into different continents. But I told you earlier when we spoke, I said, in my opinion, these families that are Jewish, remember, they're run by a French family, okay, that nobody knows, but they were never Jewish, okay? Jewish people follow Judaism. Judaism is the reading of the Torah from beginning to end every year, from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur, the same exact 5 books of Moses. That's it. That's what you read. That's what you believe. Okay. And that's Judaism. Okay. And then the other side, there were 12 tribes. You don't know, there's plenty of, this is history, even though our history, I'm sure, is really rewritten dramatically. But if you go into history, there were 12 tribes. The Israelites and the descendants of Joseph and them, they followed the Torah. These people have nothing to do with the Torah. And besides that,
they actually created another book, and it's called it's called, and this is the giveaway, is the what's it
and
called?
Kabbalah. A lot of people say Kabbalah is witchcraft.
The oral history of the Babylonian. Whenever you see Babylonian, that is a direct reference
Illuminati.
to the dark arts black cube worship. Babylonian oral history of the Talmud. Okay, that's
what they are. So even me as a Jew, I can see through this. Look, the Rothschilds benefit, the entire Council of 13, Committee of 300. They benefited from both First and Second World War. And when somebody says criticizing Soros is anti-Semitic, I want to jump over and strangle them. The man is not Jewish. He does not practice Judaism. None of them do. They all practice, like you said, the dark arts, or there's whatever the case may be. There were all these tribes, and they spread out. Well, guess what? That anti-Semitic elders of Zion. Well, there's really elders of Sion, Sion, which is Mount Hermon in Lebanon, and these are people that actually think that they're descendants of Egypt, not of Israel. So it's so crazy and convoluted, but I believe that they created anti-Semitism, as I believe the Muslim Brotherhood created Islamophobia, to say you can't criticize us or you're an anti-Semite. Well, I know a lot of Jews that never accepted me, and I don't consider every Jew, it's just like, as a Jew, it upsets me when Jewish people, that so many Jewish people were at Epstein Island, are involved in this, are involved in that. But then I had to look underneath that and be like, what is going on here? And then only to find they hate God. They don't believe in the Torah or the New Testament. They don't believe in that. They don't believe in anything like that, but they've used it to their advantage.
There's a lot to unpack in this conversation between Mel K and Sam Tripoli. Mel K starts the clip by acknowledging her investigation into the Paysar family was catalyzed by the 416th post from the mysterious 4chan/8chan/8kun author Q. The first sentence of Q drop 416 reads, Soros takes orders from P. Paul Ferber, an anon also known by the pseudonym Baruch the Scribe, explores the Q phenomenon in his book Q Inside the Greatest Intelligence Drop in History. Ferber explores a related drop 299 in his book. Quote, here were the roles of each side of the triangle. Saud +++, Rothschild ++, and Soros +. The Rothschilds were the cult leaders and controlled the banks and financial institutions, which allowed them indirect control over governments and the people. P was mysterious. Someone else at the top of the hierarchy? Saudi Arabia, through its oil wealth, was the main engine of child trafficking and the control of US and UK politicians and the tech companies. Soros was in charge of organizations for creating division around the world. Is Q a precision team of military and intelligence leaders, less than 10, with Q-level security clearance, working with Donald Trump to execute the greatest counterinsurgency in human history? Or is Q a Russian bot farm, LARPing as such? That's a question for another time. But what is undeniable is that the deep state exists and that George Soros has played an instrumental role in executing their great work. If the cabal's leadership consists of an hierarchical committee of 300, as I and many others believe, then it's well past time we hold accountable those responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity. If the Council of 13 governs the Committee of 300, then who holds the top seat within this freaky, satanic death cult? Is it P? Is P the designate of the Paysar family, and by extension, the French royal family? As outlandish as this idea may sound, let me read you what the establishment's propaganda tool, Wikipedia, provides as the narrative for the end of the French monarchy. Quote, the long 19th century. The period known as the long 19th century was a tumultuous time in French politics. The period is generally considered to have begun with the French Revolution, which deposed and then executed Louis XVI. Royalists continued to recognize his son, the putative King Louis XVII, as ruler of France. Louis was under arrest by the government of the Revolution and died in captivity, having never ruled. The Republican government went through several changes in form and constitution until French was declared an empire, following the ascension of the first consul Napoleon Bonaparte as Emperor Napoleon I. Napoleon was overthrown twice following military defeats during the Napoleonic Wars. After the Napoleonic period followed two different royal governments, the Bourbon Restoration, which was ruled successively by two younger brothers of King Louis XVI, and the July Monarchy, ruled by Louis Philippe I, a distant cousin who claimed descent from Philippe I, Duke of Orleans, younger brother of Louis XIV. The French Revolution of 1848 brought an end to the monarchy again, instituting a brief Second Republic that lasted 4 years before its president declared himself Emperor Napoleon III, who was deposed and replaced by the Third Republic, and ending monarchic rule in France for good. End quote. And with that, the French monarchy fizzled out with a whimper, allegedly. Now I know NATO, the Atlantic Council, and the Council on Foreign Relations have assured us that the representative democracies of Western Europe and North America are the greatest forms of government ever created in the history of humankind. So great that any foreign leader who resists their demands will be overthrown or invaded, in defense of international norms, of course. With that said, you may find it interesting to know how many Western countries remain constitutional monarchies. today in 2025. These include Andorra, Australia, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Monaco, the Netherlands, Norway, Spain, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and New Zealand. Even Vatican City is an absolute monarchy ruled by the Pope, the head of the Roman Catholic Church, and Bishop of Rome. Yet we're supposed to believe that after 1,000 years of consolidating power under the specious argument of the divine right of kings, the French crown simply threw in the towel and rolled off into the sunset? You know how they say that history is his story, and that history is written by the victors? What if the grand prize of the winners of World War II was the ability to write themselves out of the story entirely? Speaking of the Vatican, another leading theory for the P from whom George Soros takes orders is Pepe Orsini, the Great Pope. Just as Donald Trump has exposed the existence of the deep state, whistleblowers within the Vatican like Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano have exposed the reality of the deep church. Digital researchers have speculated that the deep church is not run by the titular head of the Vatican, known as the White Pope. The White Pope is currently Pope Leo XIV, Robert Francis Prevost, who replaced Pope Francis, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, after his death in April 2025. Pope Francis was known to wear robes with a symbol that looked suspiciously similar to the one recognized by the FBI as common pedophile code language for little boy lover. The real power is said to lie above the White Pope, first with the Black Pope. The Black Pope today is Arturo Sosa, officially the Superior General of the Jesuits. Sosa heads the most powerful religious order in the Catholic Church. The Jesuits have a long history of acting as the Vatican's military and intelligence arm, including influencing kings, revolutions, regimes, and wars. The Grey Pope, alleged to be Pepe Orsini, is the real seat of the Vatican's power and is said to represent the interests of the black nobility. The Grey Pope, or the Invisible Aristocrat, operates in the background, tying the oligarchical interests of the elites with those of the Vatican, Jesuits, Freemasons, Zionists, and other affiliated organizations. Now here's a fun fact that I learned while researching this episode. Did you know that the French king was also known as the most Christian king? Perhaps that would entitle the reigning representative to consider himself the head of the Vatican. The Council of 13, the Committee of 300's board of directors, is said to have chosen the number 13 for its satanic implications. 12 is a number of divinity, represented by the 12 apostles of Jesus. 12 is often seen as a number of completion and harmony. It's associated with the cycles like 12 months and 12 zodiac signs, and represents a balance between individuality, 1, and partnership, 2. It signifies spiritual growth, teamwork, and creative fulfillment. 13 is the number of Lucifer. It means the cabal believes their king is more powerful than God, mocking us with their evil. The members of this death cult love inverting the moral and ethical code of the Abrahamic religions. This is why the Deep Synagogue faction of organized Judaism is often referred to as the Synagogue of Satan. Researchers have suggested that the interests of the Deep Church, the Deep Synagogue, central banking, and human trafficking were tightened on May 1st of 1776. On that day, the Bavarian Illuminati was founded by demons including Adam Weishaupt, Jacob Frank, and Meyer Amschel Rothschild. William Guy Carr claims this is the reason MDCCLXXVI 1776 in Roman numerals is shown at the bottom of the $1 bill. Not because the Declaration of Independence was signed that year. In Fritz Springmeier's book, Bloodlines of the Illuminati, he proposes that the Merovingian bloodline is the satanic bloodline from which will rise the Antichrist. The Merovingians believe they have both the seed of Jesus from children he had with Mary Magdalene and the seed of Satan in their bloodline. It is from this belief that the Merovingians derived the divine right of kings. Springmeier alleges that many presidents of the United States, including George Washington and George H.W. Bush, trace their lineage to the Merovingian bloodlines, as do all of the presidents of the Mormon Church. Both the French and British monarchies are alleged to come from the Merovingian bloodline, and honestly, the more one researches these royal bloodlines, the harder it is to tell where the French monarchy ends and where the British monarchy begins. The Merovingians are said to weave their bloodlines into the 13 ruling families of the Illuminati, each of which has a seat on the Council of 13. The 13 families listed by Springmeyer are the Astor, Bundy, Collins, DuPont, Freeman, Kennedy, Lee, Onassis, Reynolds, Rockefeller, Rothschild, Russell, and Van Dyne families. Other researchers have proposed that these Illuminati bloodlines are themselves just a front for the black nobility families that actually rule the world. The Borgia, Breakspear, Somaglia, Orsini, Conti, Schighi, Colonna, Farnese, Medici, Gaetani, Pamphili, Este, and Aldobrandini families. As we fast forward to present day, are there any logical candidates for the Merovingian heir apparent atop the Council of 13? Perhaps Crown Prince William of the United Kingdom. Here's a recent interview on Sean Atwood's podcast with Roseanne Barr and Kathy O'Brien, exploring this exact question and the strange circumstances surrounding Prince William's mother's death.
What do you guys think about the death of Princess Diana?
Where are you getting these questions, boy? Where are you coming up with this shit?
I just shoot off my hip.
Oh, cool. Kathy, what do you think? You know stuff.
I don't know enough about that particular one, but because it raises questions, it needs to be looked at. You know, it didn't seem right. You know, we look at people in positions of power like she was, and if she's not cooperating, anyone in this globalist agenda, if they're not cooperating, they're going to be eliminated one way or the other.
Yeah.
If they can't be coerced and bought off and blackmailed and everything else, they're going to be eliminated another way. And then I think it's amazing how President Trump has even survived so far. But look at the character assassination that they've done on him. So the people already love Princess Di. They couldn't do a character assassination on her, and I think that that raises a lot of questions, because she sure came across as being soulful, kind, and genuinely compassionate and caring.
Yeah,
I wrote a piece once about her when I one time edited the New Yorker. We did a woman's issue, and I wrote a piece about her that they were terrified of her, that when her son sat on the throne, that he would free the people of Ireland. And boy, the editor got pretty pissed. But yeah, she was too human, and she still had feelings.
Too human, yeah.
Yeah, there was a theory that she was brought in to boost the DNA from the incestuous royal interbreeding, and then, you know, she was discarded afterwards.
Yeah, because she was used so that her son, what's his name, that's going to be king after his dad croaks. What's his name, the older brother? Anyway,
You got William and Harry.
Yeah, William. Supposedly he carries the bloodline of all 13 of the ruling families of the world. So he's going to, you know, bring the one world government and the one world religion that's part of UN Agenda 30. And that religion is Chrislam. And you just saw the King of England bow to Islam as head of the Anglican Church. So it's well on its way to, we're well on our way to Agenda 30, UN Agenda 30, and nobody sees it. It's so sad.
Could you explain to the viewers what UN Agenda 30 means, please?
Well, it just means the one world government, track and trace, track and trace technology. So, you know, they can identify your face in a crowd if you go to a freedom rally, and then you're going to go to the gulags. And, it's like Soviet Nazism. That's what it is, with Islam thrown in there for women.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in this country right now are getting very distressed And the tension is palpable because of the amount of illegal immigration that's come over here, and the government's putting them up in 5-star hotels while war veterans and our local people are suffering and homeless and not getting any. Yeah.
Same here. Well, we're being Islamicized. That's what it is. Europe has fallen. I think the UK is pretty well done. But people are waking up there, so we don't know. But America's under heavy duty Muslim Brotherhood, MK Ultra. It's all the same thing. It's all like there's a special class of pure bloods that are going to rule everybody, and all we have to do is get rid of the Jews, and we're going to be great. Both sides. Which is, Hitler and Stalin had a contest to see who could kill the most Jews. So nothing has changed. And royal power always puts a Jew in the window to take the heat. So they hide behind that. And then when the people come and want to know where their money went, they throw the Jews to the hungry dogs in the street and hide behind it. And they hide all their treasures there in Switzerland, right next to CERN. So come on, people. This is the shattering of the matrix, the big one. The big one that we would accept that there is a certain bloodline that can own everything. Hello?
Did you know that when Prince William and his wife Kate Middleton presented their third child, Prince Louis, Princess Catherine's dress was a spitting image of the one worn by Mia Farrow in Rosemary's Baby? Symbolism will be their downfall. The film Rosemary's Baby was created and directed by child rapist Roman Polanski. Polanski is known for fleeing the USA for France, where he holds dual citizenship, after being arrested for drugging, raping, and sodomizing a 13-year-old girl at Jack Nicholson's house. Polanski is also known for renting the house where CIA MKUltra asset Charles Manson had his family kill Polanski's wife, actress Sharon Tate, and 4 others. The Manson family would execute a second murder spree the following night, and the 2 incidents became known as the Tate-LaBianca murders. When the police arrived at the scene of the crime, the movie in the video player was of Sharon Tate being gang raped by 2 men while Polanski filmed it. Nothing suspicious about that, right? In Pedo Polanski's film, Mia Farrow plays Rosemary Woodhouse, who is married to an actor named Guy. Guy makes a pact with his neighbors, who are part of a satanic coven, to offer their child in exchange for Guy's successful career. The film ends with Rosemary giving birth to a demonic child and learning that he is the son of Satan, the Antichrist. Nothing weird about that, right? But I'm sure this is all just a wacky coincidence, right? You don't think these Merovingian psychopaths could really be trying to bring forth the Antichrist, right? Anyway, back to 1776 and the formation of the Bavarian Illuminati. Their initial objectives included the infiltration of French Freemasonry, and by extension, American Freemasonry. The Illuminists inverted the mystical teachings upon which Freemasonry and other secret societies had been founded. Through sexual blackmail, extortion, and bribery, these lodges were corrupted. Their metaphysical practices were turned towards black magic and demon worship, practices carried forward today by elites including Democrat Party leaders John and Tony Podesta, performance artist / spirit cooker Marina Abramovich, central banker Jacob Mr. Burns Rothschild, and actress / NXIVM cult member Allison Mack. How do we know this? William Guy Carr explains in his 1958 book, Pawns in the Game. Quote, in 1785, a courier was galloping madly on horseback from Frankfurt to Paris, carrying detailed information regarding the world revolutionary movement in general and instructions for the planned French Revolution in particular. The instructions originated with the Jewish Illuminati in Germany and were addressed to Grand Master of the Grand Orient Masons in France. The Grand Orient Lodges had been established as the revolutionary underground by the Duc de Lorraine after he, as Grand Master of French Masonry, had been initiated into the Jewish Illuminati in Frankfurt by Mirabeau. The courier was struck by lightning while passing through Ratisbon and killed. The documents he carried fell into the hands of the police, who turned them over to the Bavarian government. A record of historical events told in chronological order connects the House of Rothschild with the Jewish Illuminati in Frankfurt and the Illuminati with French Freemasonry, known as the Grand Orient Lodges, as will be shown. It has been recorded how the Jewish rabbis claimed their power to intercept the secret and hidden meanings of the writings of the Holy Scripture by special revelation obtained through Kabbalah. Claiming to have such powers was of little avail unless they had an organization or instrument in their hands to put the inspiration they claimed to have received into effect. The moneylenders, certain high priests, directors, and elders decided to organize a very secret society to serve this evil purpose. They named it the Illuminati. The word Illuminati is derived from the word Lucifer, which means bearer of the light or being of extraordinary brilliance. Therefore, the Illuminati was organized to carry out the inspirations given to the high priests by Lucifer during the performance of the Kabbalistic rites. Thus, Christ is proved justified when he named them of the synagogue of Satan. The Supreme Council of the Jewish Illuminati numbered 13. They were, and still remain, the executive body of the Council of 33. The heads of the Jewish Illuminati claim to possess superlative knowledge in everything pertaining to religious doctrine, religious rites, and religious ceremonies. They were the men who conceived the atheistic materialistic ideology, which in 1848 was published as the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx. Marx was the nephew of a Jewish rabbi, but he disassociated himself officially with the Jewish high priesthood, which when designated to perform his important duties, putting into practice once again the joint stock company principle of operation. Jewish moneylenders and merchants operated on the joint stock company principle, where they employed Christians to act as their front men while they hid in the background directing operations. The reason the Supreme Council numbered 13 was to remind the members that their one and only duty was to destroy the religion founded by Christ and his 12 apostles. To ensure secrecy and avoid the possibility of Judas-like betrayal, every man initiated into the Illuminati was required to take an oath of unlimited obedience to the head of the Council of 33 and to recognize no mortal as above him. In an organization such as the Illuminati, this meant that every member acknowledged the head of the Council of 33 as his God upon the earth. This fact explains how high-level communists, even today, swear an oath that they do not give allegiance to Russia. They don't. They give allegiance only to the head of the directors of the World Revolutionary Movement. The Supreme Council decided they would use the Ingolstadt Lodge to organize a campaign by which the agents or cells of the Illuminati would infiltrate into continental Freemasonry and, under the cloak of social enjoyment and public philanthropy, organize the revolutionary underground. Those who infiltrated into continental Freemasonry were ordered to establish lodges of the Grand Orient and use them for proselytization, and use them for proselytism so they could quickly contact non-Jews of wealth, position, and influence connected with both church and state. Then, by using the age-old methods of bribery, corruption, and graft, they could make them become willing or unwilling disciples of Illuminism. They could make them preach the inversion of the Ten Commandments of God. They could make them advocate atheistic materialism. Once this policy had been decided upon, agents of the Supreme Council contacted the Marquis of Mirabeau as the most likely person in France to serve their ends. He belonged to the nobility. He had great influence in court circles. He was an intimate friend of the Duc de Lorraine, whom they had decided they would use as a frontman to lead the French Revolution. But more important still, the Marquis of Mirabeau was devoid of morals, and his licentious excesses had led him heavily into debt. It was a simple matter for the moneylenders to have their agents contact Mirabeau, the famous French orator. Under the guise of friends and admirers, they offered to help him out of his financial difficulties. What they actually did was lead him down the primrose path into the very depths of vice and debauchery, until he was so deeply in their debt that he was forced to do their bidding. At a meeting to consolidate his debts, Mirabeau was introduced to Moses Mendelssohn, one of the big Jewish financiers, who took him in hand. Mendelssohn, in due time, introduced Mirabeau to a woman famous for her personal beauty and charm, but without moral scruples. The stunning Jewess was married to a man named Hertz, but to a man like Mirabeau, the fact that she was married only made her more desirable. It wasn't long before she was spending more time with Mirabeau than she was spending with her husband. Heavily in debt to Mendelssohn, tightly ensnared by Mrs. Hertz, Mirabeau was completely helpless. He had swallowed their bait hook, line, and sinker. But, like good fishermen, they played him gently for a time. If they exerted too great a pressure, the leader might break, and their fish might get away. The next move was to have him initiated into Illuminism. He was sworn to secrecy and unlimited obedience under pain of death. The next move was to lead him into compromising situations which mysteriously became public. This method of destroying a man's character became known as the practice of l'infamie. Because of scandals and organized detraction, Mirabeau was ostracized by many of his social equals. His resentment produced a desire for revenge, and thus he embraced the revolutionary cause. Mirabeau's task was to introduce the Duc de Lorraine to lead the revolutionary movement in France. It was implied that once the king had been forced to abdicate, he would become the democratic ruler of France. The real plotters of the French Revolution were careful not to let either Mirabeau or the Duc de Lorraine know they intended to murder the king and queen and thousands of the nobility. They made Mirabeau and the Duc de Lorraine believe that the purpose of the revolution was to free politics and religion from superstition and despotism. Another factor which made the men who were the secret power behind the revolutionary movement decide that the Duc de Lorraine should be their frontman was the fact that he was Grand Master of French Freemasonry. Adam Weishaupt was given the task of adopting the rituals and rites of Illuminism for use of initiation into the Grand Orient Masonry. He also lived in Frankfurt, Germany. Mirabeau introduced the Duc de Lorraine and his friend Talleyrand to Weishaupt and initiated them into the secrets of Grand Orient Masonry. By the end of 1773, Philippe, Duc de Lorraine, had introduced the Grand Orient ritual into French Freemasonry. By 1788, there were more than 2,000 lodges in France affiliated with Grand Orient Masonry, and the number of individual adepts exceeded 100,000. Thus, the Jewish Illuminati under Moses Mendelssohn was introduced into continental Freemasonry by Weishaupt under the guise of lodges of the Grand Orient. The Jewish Illuminati next organized secret revolutionary committees within the lodges. Thus, the Revolutionary Underground directors were established throughout France. Once Mirabeau had succeeded in having the Duc de Lorraine amalgamate the Blue or National Freemasonry in France with the Grand Orient rites, he led his friend down the same primrose path which had led to his own social ostracism. In exactly 4 years, the Duc de Lorraine was so heavily in debt that he was persuaded to engage in every form of illegal traffic and trade to recuperate his losses. But in some mysterious manner, his ventures always seemed to go wrong and he lost more and more money. By 1780, he owed 800,000 livres. Once again, the moneylenders came forward and offered him advice in regard to his business transactions and financial aid. They very nicely maneuvered him into the position of signing over to them as security for their loans, his palace, his estates, his house, and the Palais Royal. The Duc de Lorraine signed an agreement under which his Jewish financiers were authorized to manage his properties and estates so as to ensure him sufficient income to meet his financial obligations and leave him a steady and adequate income. The Duc de Lorraine had never been too bright in regard to financial matters. To him, the agreement he signed with his Jewish bankers appeared to be a sound financial deal. They had offered to manage his business affairs and turn them from a dismal failure into a great financial success. What more could he want? It is doubtful that the Duc de Lorraine even suspected that there was a nigger hidden deep in the woodpile. It is doubtful if he even suspected he had sold himself body and soul to the agents of the devil. But he had done so. He was completely in their hands. The secret powers directing the French Revolution appointed Chauderos de Laclos to manage the Palais Royal and the Duc de Lorraine's estates. De Laclos is thought to have been a Jew of Spanish origin. When he was appointed manager of the Palais Royal, he was acclaimed as the author of Les Liaisons Dangereuses and other pornographic works. He publicly defended his extreme immorality on the grounds that he studied the politics of love in all its varied aspects because of his love of politics. It matters little who Chauderos de Laclos was, it is of what he did that is of importance. He turned the Palais Royal into the greatest and most notorious house of ill fame the world has ever known. In the Palais Royal he established every kind of lewd entertainment, licentious conduct, shameless shows, obscene picture galleries, pornographic libraries, and staged public exhibitions of the most bestial forms of sexual depravity. Special opportunities were provided for men and women who wished to indulge in every form of debauchery. The Palais Royal became the center in which details of the campaign for the systemic destruction of the French religious faith and public morals were conceived and carried out. This was done on the Kabbalistic theory that the best revolutionary is a youth devoid of morals. Associated with Delaclos was a Jew from Palermo named Cagliostro, alias Joseph Balsamo. He turned one of the Duke's properties into a printing house from which he issued revolutionary pamphlets. Balsamo organized a staff of revolutionary propagandists. In addition to literature, they organized concerts and plays and debates calculated to appeal to the very lowest instincts of human nature and further the revolutionary cause. Balsamo also organized the spy rings, which enabled the men who were the secret power behind the revolutionary movement to put into operation their plan of l'infamie to be used for systematic character assassination. Men and women who were enticed into the web spun by Delaclos and Balsamo could be blackmailed into doing their bidding. Thus it was the Duc de Lorraine's estates were turned into the center of revolutionary politics, while, under the guise of lecture halls, theaters, art galleries, and athletic clubs, the gambling rooms, brothels, and wine and drug shops did a roaring trade. In this revolutionary underworld, potential leaders were first ensnared. Their consciences were at first deadened by evil associations and then killed by indulgences in evil practices. The estates of the Duc de Lorraine were turned into factories in which the secret power behind the world revolutionary movement manufactured the pieces they intended to use in their games of international chess. Scudder, who wrote Prince of the Blood, says of the Palais Royal, quote, "It gave the police more to do than all other parts of the city," end quote. But as far as the public was concerned, this infamous place was owned by the Duc de Lorraine, the cousin of the king. Only a mere handful of men and women knew that the moneylenders controlled it and used it to create a revolutionary organization which was to be the instrument of their revenge and their manual of action to further their secret aims and ambitions. After the secret documents found on the body of the courier had been read by the police, the documents were passed on to the Bavarian government. The Bavarian government ordered the police to raid the headquarters of the Illuminati. Further evidence was obtained which exposed the widespread ramifications of the world revolutionary movement. The governments of France, England, Poland, Germany, Austria, and Russia were informed of the international nature of the revolutionary plot, but as has happened repeatedly since, the governments concerned took no serious action to stop the diabolical conspiracy. Why? The only answer to the question is this: the power of the men behind the world revolutionary movement is greater than the power of any elected government. This fact will be proved time and time again as the story unfolds." Unquote. Wow, that Palais Royal sounds like a cesspool of elites, evil, and blackmail. It's almost like an old-fashioned version of Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island. Carr goes on to explain how in the 1800s, the Illuminati developed a Hegelian dialectic to split the world by ideology. This has been the basis for which they've fomented world wars. Quote, "In 1830, Weishaupt died. He carried the deception that the Illuminati was dead to his own deathbed, where, to convince his spiritual advisors, he pretended to repent and rejoin the church. According to Weishaupt's revised version of the age-old conspiracy, the Illuminati were to organize, finance, direct, and control all international organizations and groups by working their agentur into executive positions at the top. Thus it was that while Karl Marx was writing the Communist Manifesto under direction of one group of Illuminists, Professor Karl Ritter of Frankfurt University was writing the Antithesis under direction of another group, so that those who direct the conspiracy at the top could use the differences in these two ideologies to start dividing larger and larger numbers of the human race into opposing camps so they could be armed and then made to fight and destroy each other, together with their political and religious institutions. The work Ritter started was continued by the German so-called philosopher Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche, who founded Nietzscheism. Nietzscheism was developed into fascism and later into Nazism and used to enable the agentur of the Illuminati to foment World Wars I and II. End quote. Now, I have zero doubt that the Rothschild crime family is one of the most evil and disgusting families to inhabit planet Earth, and that they've used their control of the global slave trade and the central bank industrial complex to consolidate power on the cabal's behalf for centuries. But is it possible that even the counter-narrative of history has been redirected to focus on the Rothschilds and bankers rather than the lineages of monarchy? The Rothschild family has long been obsessed with demon worship with an emphasis on horned animals such as goats. One reason for this relates to the cabal's worship of Baphomet, the Babylonian transvestite demon. Many have suggested the Rothschilds' role in history has also served to be the cabal's scapegoat, deflecting attention away from the true seat of power. Earlier, I mentioned another name for the French king was the most Christian king. This is a fact I learned when researching, wait for it, who owned America's debt after the American Revolution. And you're never going to guess what I found out. This is from the U.S. State Department's Office of the Historian page titled U.S. Debt and Foreign Loans 1775 to 1795. Quote, during the American Revolution, a cash-strapped Continental Congress accepted loans from France. Paying off these and other debts incurred during the Revolution proved one of the major challenges of the post-independence period. The new U.S. government attempted to pay off these debts in a timely manner, but the debts were at times a source of diplomatic tension. The French government began to secretly ship war material to the American revolutionaries in late 1775. This was accomplished by establishing dummy corporations to receive French funds and military supplies. It was unclear whether this aid was a loan or a gift, and disputes over the status of this early assistance caused strong disagreement between American diplomats in Europe. Arthur Lee, one of the American commissioners in France, accused another, Silas Deane, of financial misdealings, while the third member of the commission, Benjamin Franklin, remained aloof. Lee eventually succeeded in convincing Congress to recall Deane. The early French aid would later resurface as one of the disputes behind the 1797 XYZ affair that led to the quasi-war with France. During the Revolution, the French government also provided the Americans with loans, eventually totaling over $2 million, most of which were negotiated by Benjamin Franklin. John Adams also secured a loan from Dutch bankers in 1782. After fighting between the Americans and the British ended in 1783, the new U.S. government established under the Articles of Confederation needed to pay off its debt, but lacked sufficient tax authority to secure any revenue. The government struggled to pay off the loans, stopping payments of interest to France in 1785 and defaulting on further installments that were due in 1787. The United States also owed money to the Spanish government and private Dutch investors, but focused on paying off the Dutch because Amsterdam remained the most likely source of future loans, which the United States successfully obtained in 1787 and 1788, despite its precarious financial state. Under the U.S. Constitution of 1789, the new federal government enjoyed increased authority to manage U.S. finances and to raise revenues through taxation. Responsibility for managing debts fell to Secretary of the Treasury Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton placed U.S. finances on firmer ground, allowing for the U.S. government to negotiate new loans at lower interest rates. In addition, the United States began to make regular payments on its French debt starting in 1790, and also provided an emergency advance to assist the French in addressing the 1791 slave revolution that began the Haitian Revolution. Although the federal government was able to resume debt payments, total federal expenditures exceeded revenues during many years in the 1790s. Hamilton therefore sought additional loans on Dutch capital markets, although the improved U.S. financial situation made these loans easier to obtain. These private loans from Dutch bankers also helped pay off loans owed to the Spanish government, back pay owed to foreign officers, and U.S. diplomatic expenses in Europe. In 1795, the United States was finally able to settle its debts with the French government with the help of James Swan, an American banker who privately assumed French debts at a slightly higher interest rate. Swan then resold these debts at a profit on domestic U.S. markets. The United States no longer owed money to foreign governments, although it continued to owe money to private investors both in the United States and Europe. End quote. Wow, good on James Swan. The American banking whiz-kid who single-handedly refinanced the French government's debt after the revolution and resold them at a profit to domestic buyers. The United States no longer owed money to foreign governments. Right. So who is this James Swan? I learned about Swan from a 1937 article in the New England Quarterly. The title of the article could not be more hilarious or relevant to our discussion. It's called James Swan, Agent of the French Republic, 1794 to 1796. The activities of Mr. James Swan of Boston, merchant and financier who from 1794 to 1796 was the official purchasing agent of the French government of the United States, deserve more attention than they have attracted. The extensive operations of this French agency are so closely interwoven with the domestic and foreign affairs of both France and the United States that only a summary account of its activities can be given. James Swan was 40 years of age when he was entrusted with the important mission of purchasing supplies in America for the French government. He had risen rapidly in the world since his humble birth in Fifeshire, Scotland. While still a boy, he had crossed to New England like the traditional penniless immigrant of American legend. Boston was then seething with the discontent and the disputes which preceded the Revolution. Young Swan, as an apprentice in a prosperous mercantile house near Faneuil Hall, was close to the nerve center of this trouble. He joined with the Sons of Liberty in the rioting, and on a December night in 1773 dressed up as a Mohawk to help throw a cargo of tea from East India House into Boston Harbor, the auspicious beginnings of a career that was never lacking in picturesque incidents. The war enabled Swan, as it did many others, to climb the social ladder rapidly. Although he did some military service, his chief activities were of an administrative nature, in the Massachusetts legislature and on the Board of War. In the midst of these duties, he found time to marry Hepzibah Clark, thereby linking himself with the gentry of the state and acquiring a considerable fortune. At the close of the war, he launched a wide variety of commercial ventures, including speculation in Maine and Boston real estate, and confiscated Loyalist property. The post-war economic depression, which was at its worst in 1786, gravely affected Swan's prosperity. He helped suppress the uprising of backwoods debtors under Daniel Shays, only to find that he himself was on the verge of bankruptcy. For one thing, he held far too many continental securities which the wickedness and relaxed state of government, according to his theory, had rendered valueless. This Scotch Yankee was rarely, however, at a loss for new schemes. At this turn in his affairs, he set out to France to extricate himself and rebuild his fortunes. By 1791, he had entered into a partnership with a French firm, rechristened Dallard, Swan & Co., which had a profitable contract with the Ministry of the Marine. "The springs of universal motion are in my tongue and hands," Swan wrote enthusiastically to his old friend General Knox. "Even greater opportunities were just around the corner." End quote. The article's author, Howard Rice, explains how in 1793, England, Spain, and Netherlands joined the coalition against the French. The ensuing English blockade aggravated France's war materials and food supplies. In October 1793, France established a Commission for Food Administration under Maximilien Robespierre, a leading provocateur of the French Revolution. This Commission de Subsistances was meant to supply food to the civilian and army populations and to fight private speculation and profiteering. During the winter of 1793 to 1794, James Swan wrote a series of memorandum recommending the importation of essential foods and raw materials from the United States in exchange for luxury goods from France, such as furniture, statues, mirrors, clocks, etc., from the mansions of royalty and the nobility. Swan suggested merchants, quote, "fix the prices in advance and as high as possible," to encourage this exportation of luxury goods. Above all, Swan warned the commission that, quote, "secrecy must surround all such commercial operations," end quote. Commercial operations on which James Swan and CA would receive a 2% commission, of course. Swan's war profiteering business prospered throughout the winter and spring months of 1794, but his big break came that summer. In April of 1794, the Commission des Substances was dissolved. Then on July 28th, Robespierre was executed. A subsequent commission was formed shortly thereafter called the Commission de Commerce et Approvisionnements. Bankers and businessmen, coincidentally many of Swan's old friends, were placed in charge of this new commission. They reorganized the system of France's foreign purchases, taking these transactions out of the hands of French diplomats. All trade with North America was instead placed with the firm of James Swan and CA. A few weeks later, a Swiss banker named Johann Caspar Schweitzer was appointed as an associate to Swan. In order to surround the agency with as much secrecy as possible, Swan and Schweitzer were to be known as Jones and Gaspard. The new firm, Swan and Schweitzer, began doing business in America in December of 1794. Rice continues his article, quote, "In January of 1795, the French government had placed an even more important credit at the disposal of the Schweitzer agency. By a decree of the Committee of Public Safety, dated January 25, 1795, Swan was empowered to negotiate for a final liquidation of American debt to France and to use these funds for the purchase of foodstuffs. The money had been loaned to the colonies in the dark days of the American Revolution. Now that the tables were turned, what more appropriate time for a final settlement? The United States had failed to meet its obligations until 1790, at which time, thanks to Hamilton's financial policy, regular payments on the debt were begun. The final installments fell due in 1802. Several schemes for an anticipated payment of the balance had been discussed, but it remained for Swan to accomplish this as a result of consultations with Oliver Wolcott, Secretary of the Treasury, in May and June of 1795. During the preceding March, the Congress had authorized the Secretary of the Treasury to convert the foreign debt into a domestic one by issuing United States stock equal to the balance of debt due abroad. The action, taken upon the advice of the retiring Secretary, Hamilton, was intended to obviate the necessity and inconvenience of borrowing from bankers in Amsterdam, then in the throes of evolution. The inconveniences of borrowing from bankers in Amsterdam, then in the throes of revolution, the sums necessary for meeting debt payments. In an agreement signed on June 15, 1795, Wolcott, on behalf of the government of the United States, agreed to place in the hands of James Swan, agent of the French Republic, United States certificates to the value of 11.2 million livres tournois, or $2 million, a sum equal to the principal, interest, and arrears due on the French debt. The American government, it may be added, was less interested in helping out a sister republic in distress than it was in ridding itself of what had become an embarrassing political obligation. End quote. Based on this article, our current State Department makes the claim, quote, the United States no longer owed money to foreign governments, although it continued to owe money to private investors both in the United States and in Europe. So who were the private investors who controlled the purse strings in the United States of America? You don't think the historical record's loose definition of private investors in the US and Europe could include members of the French, British, Dutch, Spanish, and German monarchies, do you? This is where the trail goes cold regarding the history of America's debt holders. However, names that do come up as possible purchasers from James Swan include Robert Morris, Haym Salomon, and Stephen Girard. Some of the highlights from these men's resumes include Robert Morris, best known as the financier of the American Revolution. Morris immigrated to Philadelphia from Liverpool, UK when he was 13. He quickly became a partner in a successful shipping firm based in Philadelphia called Willing, Morris & Co., and by 1775, he was the richest man in America. Morris signed the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, and the U.S. Constitution. From 1781 to 1784, Morris served as the Superintendent of Finance in Congress. He secured arms and ammunition for the Continental Army by exporting American goods to purchase military supplies from Europe. He created reform in taxes to help secure money. When money could not be secured, he used his own money to help the war effort. Along with Alexander Hamilton and Albert Gallatin, he is widely regarded as one of the founders of the financial system of the United States. Morris provided supplies to the Continental Army under General George Washington, enabling, with the help of frequent collaborator Haym Salomon, the decisive victory in the Battle of Yorktown. Morris arranged a large-scale smuggling operation to avoid Britain's laws aimed at preventing arms and ammunition from being imported into the colonies. Due to his success at smuggling gunpowder for Pennsylvania, Morris also became the chief supplier of gunpowder to the Continental Army. In October of 1776, at the urging of Morris and Benjamin Franklin, Congress authorized the appointment of 2 envoys charged with seeking a formal treaty of alliance with France. Benjamin Franklin and Arthur Lee were appointed as these envoys. Along with Silas Deane, Franklin greatly expanded arms shipments from France and Spain. Willing, Morris & Co. engaged in the slave trade. The firm advertised slave sales and directed company ships to purchase slaves from Africa to sell in British North America. After the American Revolution, Morris focused on expanding his shipping business. With national finances in tatters, Morris led a group of merchants in creating the Bank of Pennsylvania. Morris also reformed government contracting and established the Bank of North America in 1781, the first congressionally chartered national bank to operate in the United States. William Bingham, rumored to be the richest man in America after the Revolutionary War, purchased 9.5% of the available shares of the Bank of North America. The greatest share, however, 63.3%, was purchased on behalf of the United States government by Robert Morris, using a gift in the form of a loan from France and a loan from Netherlands. Morris would later support Hamilton's proposal for the establishment of a national bank, the first bank of the United States, in 1791. Did you catch that part about the ownership of our first central bank, the Bank of North America? A bank which predates the US Constitution? Wikipedia notes that Robert Morris bought nearly 2/3 of the Bank of North America using a gift in the form of a loan from France and the Netherlands. Was it a gift, or was it a loan? Or is this more like money laundering? It almost makes you wonder who has been in control of America's financial system ever since. Also, did you know that the financier of the American Revolution was also a gun-running slave trader? This might be a crazy idea, but is it possible that the elites who profiteer off of war aren't great people? Here's another crazy fact about Robert Morris. In 1781, he purchased a home on Market Street that was 2 blocks north of Independence Hall, the seat of the Second Continental Congress. In 1790, President George Washington made this house his primary residence, while Morris and his family moved to a smaller neighboring property. The President's house, as it became known, served as the residence of the President until 1800, when President John Adams moved to the White House in Washington, D.C. Did you know our first president lived in Philadelphia, in the home of the country's richest man, who happened to be a gun-running, slave-trading central banker? Did you know that Washington had offered Robert Morris the position of Secretary of Treasury, but Morris had declined that offer and recommended Alexander Hamilton instead? It seems like our history textbooks conveniently left out these details. Anyway, other possibilities for the private investors who refinanced the French government's debt in 1795 include Haym Salomon, a Polish-born American merchant best known for his actions during the American Revolution, when he was the prime financier to the Continental Congress. Born in Leszno, Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, Salomon studied finance in Western Europe. In 1775, he immigrated to New York City, where he established himself as a financial broker for American merchants engaged in overseas trade. Salomon was born to a Sephardic Jewish family descended from Spanish and Portuguese Jews who gradually migrated to Poland following the expulsion of Jews from Spain in 1492. He became the agent to the French consul as well as the paymaster for all French forces in North America. In 1781, he began working extensively with Robert Morris, the newly appointed Superintendent of Finance of the United States. From 1781 to 1784, Salomon's fundraising and personal lending helped provide over $650,000, or $14.8 million in 2024 dollars, in financing General George Washington in his war effort. His most meaningful financial contribution came immediately prior to the Siege of Yorktown. With that investment, Washington conducted the Yorktown Campaign, which proved to be the final battle of the Revolution. Salomon brokered the sale of a majority of the war aid from France and the Dutch Republic, selling bills of exchange to American merchants. Like Washington and many prominent men associated with the American Revolution, Salomon was a Freemason. Stephen Girard, a French-born American banker and philanthropist. Born in Bordeaux, Girard immigrated to the 13 colonies where he established himself in the American banking industry. Girard eventually accumulated a large estate which included a slave plantation in Louisiana. A 2007 article in Fortune magazine estimated that he was the 4th richest American in history. By 1790, Girard had a fortune of $6,000 and a small fleet of trading vessels. In 1791, his merchantmen in the former colony of Saint-Domingue were involved in salvaging goods owned by French planters during the Haitian Revolution. Some might say the owners of these goods had been murdered and their treasures looted. Girard also participated in the Old China trade, financing voyages to Canton during which opium was smuggled into China. After the charter of the First Bank of the United States expired in 1811, Girard purchased most of its stock in its facilities on South 3rd Street in Philadelphia and re-established it under his direct personal ownership. During the War of 1812, Girard single-handedly saved the federal government of the United States from bankruptcy by personally financing the American war effort. Girard's bank was the principal source of government credit during the war, worth an outstanding $1 million. Towards the end of the war, when the financial credit of the U.S. government was at its lowest, Girard used nearly all of his financial resources to underwrite 95% of the war loan issued, which enabled the United States to prolong the war. After the war, he became a large stockholder in, and one of the directors of, the Second Bank of the United States. Crazy how central banking, slave trading, drug traffickers keep popping up as the financiers of America, no? When you do research into these topics, you can't help but encounter arguably the most despicable gun runners in history. The DuPont family. The DuPont family traces back to the 1737 marriage of Samuel DuPont and Anne Alexandrine Montesquieu in Paris, France. Samuel and Anne's son, Pierre Samuel DuPont, started as a watchmaker, but soon became involved in writing tracts and articles that supported the economic and political policies of the World Revolutionary Movement. A member of French Freemasonry, Pierre DuPont's writings in The Globe in the early 1800s laid out ideas and plans for European unity, plans which later evolved into the European Union. Pierre was an advisor to Louis XVI, the last king of France before the French Revolution. After Louis XVI was executed during the Revolution, the DuPonts emigrated to the U.S. in 1799 and settled in Wilmington, Delaware. This was just 4 short years after Louis XVI's son, Louis XVII, died in prison, allegedly. At Thomas Jefferson's request, Pierre DuPont started a plan for national education in this country. Jefferson arranged for the first gunpowder order from the American government when the DuPonts went into the gunpowder business. Pierre's son, Eleuthère Irene, or E.I. DuPont, founded the DuPont Gunpowder Company in Delaware. E.I. DuPont's mill tripled their gunpowder production from 1804 to 1805. DuPont's growth accelerated during the War of 1812. E.I. DuPont de Nemours and Company was on its way to becoming one of the world's largest producers of explosives. Every war the U.S. has fought since then has depended upon DuPont gunpowder. Of course, the DuPont monopolists never hesitated to arm our enemies in those wars as well. E.I. DuPont was also to be selected along with his friend Nicholas Biddle to be a director of the First Bank of the United States. E.I.'s son Alfred Victor DuPont became head of the company in 1837, then was succeeded by his brother Henry DuPont in 1850. During the 19th century, the company expanded its assortment of explosives and chemicals. DuPont's Brandywine River powder mill produced nearly 1/3 of the Union Army's requirements during the Civil War. Henry would run the business into the ground despite his family's control of the gunpowder market. However, after he died, Alfred I. DuPont, Pierre Samuel DuPont II, and Thomas Coleman DuPont took over various DuPont manufacturing affairs. This triumvirate revived the aging DuPont factories and bought out the rest of the gunpowder manufacturers, giving them an absolute monopoly in munitions. Continuing to expand after the Civil War, by 1902, DuPont operated 40 gunpowder and explosive plants, leading to antitrust claims. The Sherman Antitrust Act forced the 1913 creation of Hercules Powder Company and Atlas Powder Company. The connection between them and the parent company remained largely intact. During World War I, the company expanded its Carneys Point plant to nearly 70 times its pre-war capacity and opened 5 additional plants. Long after the war, in 1934, DuPont Company's wartime production led to accusations of profiteering. The DuPonts denied the charges while testifying before the Senate Munitions Investigative Committee. The three DuPonts running the company at the turn of the 19th century ended up in some serious infighting after a few years. Alfred divorced his wife to marry his cousin, of which Coleman and many others did not approve. From 1906 to 1920, the family broke into 2 factions led by Alfred and Coleman. By April of 1918, Alfred had defeated Coleman for control of Delaware's politics. 2 years earlier, he had bought control of 9 Delaware newspapers. After Alfred died in 1935, his widow Jessie Ball DuPont and her brother Ed Ball took over Alfred DuPont's fortune, and Ed became the most powerful man in Florida. Irene DuPont took over as president of DuPont in 1919. The DuPont family has built dozens of beautiful estates across Delaware in the 20th century, several of which would come to be owned by members of the Biden family. Like many of the richest New World robber barons, the DuPonts hold their wealth at asset management firm Brown Brothers Harriman, or BBH. During World War II, BBH was run by George H.W. Bush's grandfather, George Herbert Walker. Allen Dulles, who became the first civilian director of the CIA, was also a partner at BBH. Dulles was instrumental in negotiating loans to Germany on behalf of BBH clients. Allen Dulles and his brother John Foster Dulles would meet with Adolf Hitler on January 3rd of 1933. After Hitler agreed to repay the loans owed by Germany, the Dulles brothers lent their support to the Nazi leader and gave the green light for him to become chancellor. Throughout the war, the BBH syndicate would continue illegally trading with the enemy, including with the sale of DuPont explosives to the German government. After World War II broke out, the DuPont family became heavily involved in the Office of Strategic Services, or OSS, the intelligence agency precursor to the CIA. DuPont also designed, constructed, and operated a plutonium plant for the Manhattan Project during World War II. Joe Biden's home state of Delaware, the first state in the Union, has a history entwined with that of the DuPont family. In 2019, Tim Murphy of Mother Jones magazine published an article about Delaware's shady history and its ties to the DuPont and Biden families. Here are sections of his article, House of Cards, How Joe Biden Helped Build a Financial System That's Great for Delaware Banks and Terrible for the Rest of Us. Quote, in early 1973, as Joe Biden was settling into his new job in Washington, D.C., Ralph Nader published a deconstruction of what had made the freshman Democrat senator state of Delaware the most anodyne of states so exceptional. The answer, the company state explained, had to do with the unique relationship between government and commerce. Delaware was less a democracy than a fiefdom, contorting its laws to meet the demands of its corporate lords. Preeminent among them was the chemical giant DuPont. Nader took readers to Rodney Square in the heart of Wilmington. There was the ritzy Hotel DuPont, housed in a building owned by DuPont, next to a theater built by DuPont, connected to a bank controlled by the DuPont family, surrounded by law offices and brokerages, all affiliated in some way with what was simply known as the company. The DuPonts owned the state's two largest newspapers and employed a tenth of the state legislature. The governor was a former executive. The state's members of Congress for most of the 1970s was Pierre Samuel DuPont IV. General Motors could buy Delaware, Nader quipped, if DuPont was willing to sell it. Over the next 2 decades, as Biden rose through the ranks of the Democratic Party, the state's center of gravity began to shift from the world of chemicals to the big business of other people's business, banking, accounting, law, and telemarketing. But if the industry had changed, the ethos remained. Delaware was the company's state. It owed its prosperity to its willingness to give corporations what they wanted. Biden did not create the system, but he used his influence to strengthen and protect it. He cast key votes that deregulated the banking industry, made it harder for individuals to escape their credit card debts and student loans, and protected his state's status as a corporate bankruptcy hub. Delaware is a tiny state, and because it is tiny, it has had to get creative to survive. Small countries sell shipping rights, citizenship, and secrecy. Delaware offers an American variation of the same, a legal and administrative sanctuary that allows businesses to do things that they could not do elsewhere. The foundation for the state's economy began with its 1776 Constitution, which created a special venue for the handling of business disputes called the Chancery Court. But Delaware's role as America's corporate epicenter traces back to 1899 when, with the backing of the DuPonts, legislators passed the General Corporation Law, allowing anyone in the United States who wanted to run a company in Delaware to do so. The number of corporations based in the state grew quickly, and when New Jersey, the OG of lax incorporation laws, decided to crack down on trusts, Delaware welcomed the exiles. End quote. Federal authorities worry that in addition to legitimate businesses, drug traffickers, embezzlers, and money launderers are increasingly heading to Delaware, where shell companies can be easily established with no questions asked. Nearly half of all public corporations in the U.S. are incorporated in Delaware, which has more corporate entities than people. The DuPont family's support of the Biden family extends beyond Joe and Bo to the black sheep / crack addict of the family, Hunter Biden. On April 26, 2016, Henry DuPont wrote Hunter Biden an email subject Burisma, which reads, "Hunter, Greetings from sunny Qatar. I've been meaning to reach out for some time. I'd very much like to discuss Burisma with you, as I told you briefly in Jansen's not long ago. I had happened to meet Alex Kutlarski last year in NYC, and our discussions led to his asking if I could get work for them here in the region. My group is doing that, and far more. Most importantly, one of the sons of the current ruler of the UAE has begun an agency, and he is interested in taking on Burisma as his first client. It must be 100%, and they have to be ready. I need to do diligence with you. We are moving this forward, so the sooner we can talk, the better. I'm back in Delaware Sunday. Can we get together soon? Please let me know. Cheers, Henry. So here we have the heir to the DuPont fortune, a fortune built on monopolies in chemicals, munitions, and agriculture, reaching out to Hunter Biden regarding his corrupt Ukrainian gas company, Burisma. Burisma is offering a son of the current ruler of the UAE to take on Burisma as his first client. Nothing at all suspicious about that, right? Earlier, Melke discussed how she had dismissed Fritz Springmeier's book, Bloodlines of the Illuminati, in which he names the DuPonts as a ruling bloodline. That all changed when the book mysteriously became available on CIA.gov as of February 2nd, 2018, during President Trump's first term. The document was supposedly uploaded to the CIA's website because it had been on Osama bin Laden's computer at his Abbottabad compound, seized during the raid that took him out, or that took out someone who looked just like him, 7 years earlier. You remember Osama bin Laden, right? The same member of Saudi Arabia's nobility, who was funded and armed by the CIA throughout the 1980s, who then orchestrated the largest terrorist attacks on the American homeland on September 11th, 2001. You remember when George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were running the country? You don't think Bush, Cheney, and their neocon buddies from the Project for the New American Century could have colluded with criminal elements of American, Saudi, and Israeli intelligence to orchestrate this false flag attack against the American homeland, do you? That might help explain what Rabbi Abraham Finkelstein meant in his 2006 interview with Pastor James Wickstrom when he said,
"Yeah, we got a call from the Kahilla that Ariel and some of the boys in the Mossad, they got together and they wired up the buildings and they took them down. It was going to be a hard thing to take them down anyway because we wanted to build some new structures and the buildings were getting old and it was time to bring them down. This way, we make some shekels by destroying the building. Old Silverman, who's a good friend of mine there, Larry, he got a twofer. He got a 2-for-1 there, and he doubled the insurance magically just 3 months before it happened, and then he got a 2-for hit on it, so he made like 4 times his money. I should have been in on the deal. He asked me, but I said, I don't know, let me think about it. It took a little too long for me to think about it, and he pulled the plug. He pulled it, as they say, and so the buildings come down. But at least I got in on the market, and I was short American Airlines, I was short United Airlines, I was short Lloyd's of London Insurance Company because they took a big hit. Allianz Insurance Company, I was short them. So I made a few shekels.
It also might explain why former Congressman Kurt Weldon claimed the W. Bush and Cheney administration lied us into the Afghanistan war, that Osama bin Laden had been provided safe harbor in Iran, and that bin Laden had never been in Afghanistan. You'll remember the Afghanistan war was then used by the W. Bush and Cheney administration to lie us into the Iraq war over weapons of mass destruction that Saddam Hussein never possessed. The public deserves the truth behind the 9/11 attacks, the crisis that initiated the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, and an accurate accounting of the bin Laden raid. Those responsible for war crimes and crimes against humanity must be held accountable. I suspect we'll find the truth follows a trend that is repeated time and again throughout American history: the insidious ties between central banks, crisis initiation, organized crime, and war. We'll return to this trend, but first I want to wrap up the discussion on who heads the Committee of 300 and why it's so important we hold this cabal to account. As we explore who is P and whether they had the Committee of 300, it's worth examining the British royal family's role in this cabal. The family has a sordid history of pedophilia scandals and of allegations they profiteer from drug and human trafficking. Prince Andrew has been accused by Virginia Roberts Giuffre of having sexually assaulted her at Ghislaine Maxwell's London mansion, at Jeffrey Epstein's mansion in New York City, and at Epstein Island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Roberts allegedly killed herself in April of 2025, about 1 month after being seriously injured when a car she was riding in was hit by a school bus in Western Australia. Nothing suspicious about that, right? Our love and prayers are with Virginia and her family, as they are with all the victims of human trafficking, be they with us in spirit or in flesh. We honor their lives by holding these criminals to account and exposing their crimes. In July of 2019, the normies of the world woke up to the fact that elites engage in child trafficking after the arrest of Jeffrey Epstein. They were shocked to learn of his relationship with global titans including Prince Andrew, Bill Clinton, Bill Gates, Les Wexner, and Donald Trump. While this news broke in the mainstream media, the Anons were busy researching the darker elements of the Epstein saga. Q broke a major story in this scandal, first by highlighting the fact in August 2018 that on Pedo Island, Little St. James, there was a temple on it. In March of 2019, Q would go into further detail about what this temple was used for and drop 3050. Quote, "This is not just about sex trafficking. 1. Will the rich and powerful influence the court to prevent the unsealing? The tale of 2. 1. Sex resort, non-temple resort only. Trafficked and drugged underage girls. 2. Occult, worship of evil, temple. Classified 1 through 99, Haiti. Pray for the victims. Q." In this tale of 2, breaking the truth of the cabal's involvement in occult worship and child sacrifice has long been considered a core secret that could bring down this entire criminal enterprise. With that in mind, I wanted to share a clip from Sean Otto Tabatabai of The People's Voice regarding another alleged Epstein associate and leading candidate for Who is P, King Charles III.
Prince Andrew wasn't the only royal caught in Epstein's web. He was just the one foolish enough to get exposed and thrown to the wolves. But there's another figure who managed to stay in the shadows. His older brother, the man who became king. The same man who maintained a close friendship with Jimmy Savile, Britain's most notorious paedophile.
So it's no surprise that they are caught up with the likes of Jeffrey Epstein, who made a living using children to leverage power, and Jimmy Savile, who had unfettered access to rape hundreds of children inside NHS hospitals and was a dear friend of King Charles.
Ghislaine Maxwell says that she can recite Epstein's client list by heart. Of course she can, because remembering secrets and collecting compromise wasn't just part of the job, it was the job. A job she performed expertly for decades, ever since she was groomed by Israeli intelligence under the watchful eye of her father Robert Maxwell, a known Mossad asset. Because when you're owned by the global elite, independent thought isn't an option. You follow orders. And King Charles, he's blackmailed to the eyeballs, completely owned. And when you're owned by the hidden hands that orchestrate global events, you don't speak for yourself. You give speeches like this.
Here we need a vast military-style campaign to marshal the strength of the global private sector. With trillions at its disposal, far beyond global GDP, and with the greatest respect, beyond even the governments of the world's leaders, it offers the only real prospect of achieving fundamental economic transition. So, how do we do it?
This case isn't just about one man or one network, it's about the systemic use of paedophilia as a weapon, a tool of blackmail, a method to enforce silence and loyalty at all costs within elite circles. This isn't new, it's an ancient tactic, used for millennia to bind people to the shadows and keep the secrets of the powerful buried deep. But those days are coming to an end. We're going to show you the evidence. What you're about to hear is dark and it's disturbing. And yes, it's dangerous. But it's the truth. And the truth is what we need if we're ever going to break the cycle. If we want to stop our children from being abused with impunity, we can't afford to look away anymore. We have to face it together. The British royal family has a long, well-documented history of incest. And yes, there are even accounts of ritual cannibalism buried in their lore. But compared to their true vices, these are mere trifles.
Throughout the First World War, the people of England were questioning the loyalty of the German bloodlines who ruled over them, which prompted the royal family to change their name to Windsor in 1917. 9 years later, Queen Elizabeth was born, who was initiated into the Druid Order in 1946, married Prince Philip of Nazi bloodlines in 1947, and gave birth to Charles in 1948. In 2010, William Coombs, survivor of Canada's infamous residential schools where the mass graves of children were found, claimed to have witnessed Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip visit the Kamloops Residential School in 1964, where they took 10 of the children away with them, never to return. A year later, William Coombs dies in the hospital. In 1988, Prince Philip told the German press that he hopes to be reincarnated as a deadly virus to help with the population problem. And his son, King Charles, likes to joke on television how he is related to Dracula.
His Royal Highness Prince Charles, who can trace his ancestry back to Romania's dark and distant past.
The genealogy shows that I'm descended from Vlad the Impaler, you see. So I do have a bit of a stake in the country.
As it were.
Britain and the Commonwealth are now ruled by a sovereign descended from Vlad the Impaler, the brutal tyrant known for dipping his bread in the blood of his victims. And, according to a member of Mel Gibson's child trafficking task force, future generations will speak about the horrific crimes of King Charles in the same breath.
I was brought in as part of a forensic review team, independent contractors. We were told it was a standard drone reconnaissance pull, part of a routine island scan. But once we saw the footage, we knew it was anything but routine. Location was Epstein's Island, Little St. James. Late evening, dense canopy, firelight flickering through the trees. But the most chilling part wasn't the setting, it was the people. At the center stood Charles, masked and robed, leading what can only be described as a ritual. He wore elaborately carved animal mask, boar or stag maybe, and an exaggerated wooden phallus strapped ceremonially to his body. It wasn't hidden, it was the focal point. He moved with authority. This was no guest. He was presiding. Around him, others danced and mimicked ancient rites, chanting in languages I couldn't identify, possibly Enochian or some dead dialect. Their motions were stylized but intense, some theatrical, some disturbingly real. Young victims, naked, restrained, or sedated, were paraded and positioned as part of the performance. It culminated with the selection of one, smaller, motionless, clearly drugged, placed in a wooden effigy and set alight. We saw the fire begin. We saw them watching. I took the footage straight to my handler. Within hours, I was pulled from the case, debriefed under sedative, and hit with a Section 12 gag order. I only know one other member of my team made it out. 2 disappeared. One was later listed as suicide in Maryland. No obituary, no funeral. The footage was traced back to John Coffey. He'd commissioned private surveillance over the island in early 2019 using ex-military drone pilots contracted through a shell company, Hades Optics. The raw files were split into 3 fragments and encrypted. One was intercepted. One ended up with us. And one, we believe, is still out there. McAfee was dead less than 6 months later. Since then, any mention of the footage gets scrubbed. Algorithms kill the metadata within hours. Posts vanish. Domains go dark. Even Wayback Crawlers are blocked. We suspect coordination between MI6, Mossad, and a rogue domestic counter-intel unit. My guess? Something dark budget. Maybe spun off from DARPA. I keep hearing the name Vantacore. Every institution that could investigate is compromised. The DOJ has the names. Ghislaine Maxwell gave them the list. She can only quote them from memory because compromat was her father's legacy, and she carried it forward. And at the top of the list, Charles. Not just a visitor, a participant. The royals are insulated by centuries of ceremony, diplomacy, and secrecy. But if the footage is released and authenticated, the monarchy is finished. And not just the monarchy. This will crater trust in governments, media, intelligence networks, and justice systems around the world. The illusion of control. So yeah, they're scrambling, and they should be. Because once this footage drops, it's game over.
According to those on the inside, King Charles doesn't just participate in these rituals, he considers them his birthright. A legacy passed down through bloodlines steeped in secrecy, power, and ritual. And Charles isn't the only one with blood ties to darkness in high places. Every European royal family can trace at least one ancestor back to the imperial bloodline of the Roman Empire. The Roman emperors, in turn, can trace their lineage to the royal bloodlines of the Egyptian dynasties. And those Egyptian dynasties, they can trace their origins back to the Babylonian royal bloodlines, the first rulers in history to claim a divine right to govern humanity. These same Babylonian royals were also the first to perform ritualistic child sex acts and blood sacrifices in dark ceremonies that they believed granted them special powers. These rituals have woven through history, and it appears that the royal family, along with the Rothschild family, continue to embrace child sacrifice and ritualistic paedophilia as one of their ancient rites and customs.
These people are sick, and their time is done. So does P head the Committee of 300? If so, is P the Pesar family designate, Pepe Orsini, or the Rothschild family designate? Is it a monarch like King Charles III, or even some multi-dimensional metaphysical force like Pindar we don't yet understand? Whoever it is, the nexus of power clearly lies at the intersection of monarchy, central banking, and organized crime. So let's keep pulling those threads, and then we can talk about how we bring justice to these motherfuckers.
The truth leaks in. Shadows danced in a smoky room, but daylight cracks and ends the gloom. Oh, the golden age is coming through, like a phoenix rising bright and true. Otis 47 got him on the run. A new dawn breaks with the morning. Page just begun.